When Mara Voss placed her scarred hands on the paralyzed boy's legs, she knew three things. The father would kill her if he found out, the doctor would have her arrested, and the child had maybe 6 months before his body gave up entirely. But she'd seen legs like his before, back when her father was still alive, before they took everything from him. Before they took everything from her. What happened next would shatter a family, expose a decade-old theft, and prove that some debts can only be paid in blood, sweat, and one impossible step. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The ranch sat like a broken tooth against the Montana horizon, all splintered wood and peeling paint, the kind of place where hope went to die and nobody bothered with a funeral. Mara Voss had been there 3 weeks, and in 3 weeks she'd learned to make herself invisible. Not difficult for a woman like her, heavy-set, plain-faced, the kind of face people's eyes slid right past. The housekeeper had quit in January. They needed someone who could cook, clean, and keep her mouth shut. Mara needed a roof and wages. Simple transaction, no questions asked. She hadn't planned to stay long. Never did. The main house groaned in the wind, 2 stories of timber and regret. Caleb Hadley owned it, inherited it from his father, along with 4,000 acres of scrubland and a bitterness he wore like a second skin. His wife had left 2 years back, just packed a bag one morning and drove until the ranch was a speck in her rearview mirror. Couldn't blame her. Some places eat people alive. Mara learned the rhythm quick, up before dawn. Coffee strong enough to strip paint. Breakfast for Caleb in the ranch hands. Eggs, bacon, biscuits that actually rose instead of sitting in your gut like stones. She'd learned to cook from her father, back when cooking meant the difference between making it through winter or not. Clean the kitchen, sweep the floors, stay out of sight when Caleb was in one of his moods, which was most days. And never, under any circumstances, go upstairs to the boy's room. The boy. Elias. 12 years old, paralyzed from the waist down for nearly 2 years. A riding accident, they said. Horse spooked, threw him against a fence post, snapped something in his spine that the doctors in Billings couldn't fix. He'd been a runner before that, Caleb's pride. Fast as hell, won every race at the county fair. Now he spent his days in a wheelchair by the window, staring out at land he'd never walk again. Nobody talked about him much. The ranch hands avoided the subject like it carried plague. Caleb never mentioned his son at all, just set a tray outside the boy's door 3 times a day and walked away. Sometimes the food got eaten. Sometimes it didn't. Mara had seen the boy exactly twice in 3 weeks. Once through a window, pale face pressed against glass. Once in the hallway, when she'd brought up fresh linens and he'd wheeled himself to the doorway, just watching her with eyes too old for his face. She hadn't said anything. Neither had he. The 3rd week, something changed. It was a Tuesday, late March. The kind of day where winter hadn't quite let go and spring wasn't ready to commit. Mara was hanging laundry in the yard, clothespins between her teeth, when she heard it. Faint, almost lost in the wind. Crying. Not the loud kind. The buried kind. The kind that came from someone who'd learned that crying didn't help, so why bother making noise? She looked up at the 2nd floor window. The boys' room. The curtain moved, just barely. Mara stood there with a wet sheet in her hands, wind cutting through her coat, and something in her chest twisted hard. She knew that sound. She'd made it herself years ago, after her father died and the lawyers came with their papers and their smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Not your problem, she told herself. Keep your head down, do your job, leave in a month like you planned. She hung the rest of the laundry, went inside, started dinner, pot roast, potatoes, carrots, the kind of meal that filled bellies and didn't require conversation. Caleb ate in silence, same as always, then disappeared into his office with a bottle of whiskey. The ranch hands ate in the bunkhouse. The boy's tray sat outside his door, untouched. Mara cleared the table, washed the dishes, checked the locks like Caleb insisted, front door, back door, barn door. Everything locked up tight, like they were keeping the world out, or keeping something in. She should have gone to bed. Should have climbed the stairs to the tiny room above the kitchen, the one that smelled like dust and old wood, and gotten whatever sleep she could before dawn dragged her out of bed again. Instead, she stood at the base of the stairs, looking up into the darkness. The boy's tray was still there, stone cold by now. Not your problem. Mara's father used to say that the body remembered things the mind wanted to forget. Muscle memory, he called it. The way a hand knew how to grip a tool even after years away from it. The way feet knew how to find their balance on uneven ground. The body remembered. He'd been a healer, her father. Not a doctor. Never had the education for that. Never had the money. But he knew things. Old things, passed down from his grandmother, who'd learned from hers. Herbs and pressure points and water therapy, the kind of knowledge that didn't come from textbooks. He'd helped people the doctors had given up on, farmers who couldn't afford city specialists, ranch hands with broken backs, children with twisted limbs, and then he'd died. And the ranch, their ranch, the one his family had worked for 40 years, got swallowed up by lawyers and deeds and a handshake deal that turned out to be worth less than the paper it wasn't written on. Mara had been 19. By 20, she was alone. By 21, she'd learned that the world didn't give a damn about fair. She'd spent the last 8 years drifting, ranch to ranch, town to town, never staying long enough for anyone to ask questions. She had her father's notebooks hidden in the bottom of her travel bag, leather-bound, pages yellow with age, filled with his cramped handwriting, diagrams, recipes, techniques. She'd read them so many times she could recite them in her sleep, but she'd never used them, never tried. What was the point? Helping people just got you noticed, and getting noticed meant answering questions, and answering questions meant... The crying came again, quieter this time, almost a whisper. "Damn it," Mara muttered. She climbed the stairs. The hallway was dark, just one window at the far end letting in weak moonlight. 4 doors, 3 closed. One, the boys', cracked open just enough to see the tray sitting there, food congealed and cold. Mara picked up the tray, knocked softly. "Go away," the boy's voice rough, like he'd been crying for a while. "Your dinner's cold," Mara said. "I can heat it up if you want." "I said go away." She should have listened, should have set the tray down and walked away. Instead, she pushed the door open. The room was bigger than hers, but just as sparse. Bed against one wall, made with military precision. Desk covered in books. School books looked like, though she doubted anyone was checking his homework. Wheelchair by the window, and in it, the boy. Elias. Skinny kid, all elbows and angles, dark hair that needed cutting. His back was to her. "I don't want company," he said. "Good. I'm not company. I'm the cook." Mara set the tray on the desk. "You didn't eat breakfast either, or lunch yesterday? You trying to starve yourself or just piss off your father?" That got him to turn around. His face was blotchy, eyes red. "What do you care?" "I don't." She meant it to sound harsh, but it came out tired instead. "But I spent an hour making that pot roast, and it's a damn good pot roast, so it's insulting when it goes to waste." He stared at her. She stared back. "You're not going to give me some speech about how I need to eat to keep my strength up?" he said, bitter. "About how I should be grateful I'm alive?" "Nope." "Good. I'm sick of speeches." "I bet." Mara glanced at the wheelchair, at his legs under the blanket. "How long?" 2 years, 1 month, 14 days. He said it like he'd been counting, probably had. "Doctors say it's permanent, nerve damage, nothing they can do." He laughed, sharp and ugly. "My dad won't even look at me anymore. Easier to pretend I don't exist." Mara knew that feeling. After her father died, after the land was taken, she'd spent months invisible. People looked through her, not at her. It was safer that way. Hurt less. "You ever get feeling back?" she asked. "Even a little?" Elias shrugged. "Sometimes I think I do. Tingling, maybe. But the doctor said that's just phantom sensation. Nerves misfiring, doesn't mean anything." "Doctors say a lot of things." He gave her a sharp look. "What's that supposed to mean?" Mara picked up the tray again. "Eat your dinner. It's good even when it's cold." She was halfway to the door when he spoke again. "Wait." She stopped. "You think..." His voice cracked, started over. "You think there's a chance that that it's not permanent?" She should have said no. Should have told him the truth, that she didn't know, that she wasn't a doctor, that hope was dangerous when you had nothing to back it up. Instead, she heard herself say, "I think bodies are tougher than people give them credit for." That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. She left before he could ask anything else, went back downstairs, back to the kitchen, and stood there with her hands braced against the counter, breathing hard. Idiot, she thought. Stay out of it, not your fight. But that night, after everyone was asleep, she dug her father's notebooks out of her bag and started reading. The next morning, Caleb Hadley cornered her in the kitchen. He was a tall man, lean and weathered, the kind of face that looked like it had been carved out of the same rock as the land. Mid-40s, maybe? Hard to tell. Hard-living, aged people fast out here. "You went into my son's room last night," he said. Not a question. Mara didn't stop kneading the biscuit dough. Trey was still outside, figured I'd check on him. "I didn't hire you to check on him. I hired you to cook and clean." He wasn't eating. That's his choice. She looked up, met his eyes. They were the same color as his son's, gray, like storm clouds. "Kid's 12. 12-year-olds make dumb choices. He's not your concern." "Fine." She went back to the dough. "He starves. I'll make less food. Save you money." Caleb's jaw tightened. For a second, she thought he might fire her on the spot. Wouldn't be the first time she'd been kicked off a ranch for talking back. But he just said, "Stay out of his room," and walked away. Mara finished the biscuits, served breakfast, cleaned up, did the laundry, all the normal things. And when evening came and Elias's dinner tray sat outside his door again, untouched, she picked it up and knocked. "It's me again," she said. Silence. "I'm coming in." "My dad said you're not supposed to." "Your dad says a lot of things." She pushed the door open. Elias was by the window again, same position as last night. "You gonna eat, or am I wasting my time?" He turned the wheelchair around, looked at her with something that might have been suspicion or might have been hope. Hard to tell. "You meant what you said?" he asked. "About bodies being tough?" "Yeah." "Prove it." Mara set the tray down. "How?" "I don't know. You're the one who said it." His hands clenched the armrests. "Everyone else just lies to me, tells me to accept it, move on, be grateful I'm alive. But you sounded like you actually believed it." She pulled up the desk chair, sat down, looked at this kid who'd been locked in a room for 2 years, forgotten by his own father, told by every doctor that his life was over before it really started. "My father was a healer," she said quietly. "Not a doctor. Couldn't afford medical school. But he helped people. People the doctors gave up on." Elias leaned forward. "Could he have helped me?" "Maybe. I don't know." "But you know what he knew, right? You learned from him?" "Some of it." "Then try." His voice broke. "Please, I don't care if it doesn't work. I don't care if it's a long shot. I can't spend the rest of my life in this chair. I can't." Mara thought about her father's notebooks, thought about the diagrams and techniques and warnings scribbled in the margins. This doesn't always work. Some damage is permanent. Don't make promises you can't keep. "If I try," she said slowly, "and it doesn't work, you can't blame me. You can't sue me or get me arrested or I won't, I swear. And your father can't know, not yet. If he finds out, he'll throw me off this ranch so fast. He won't find out." Mara studied him. Saw the desperation there, the same desperation she'd felt at 19 when the lawyers took her land and she realized nobody was coming to save her. "Okay," she said, "but we do this my way. Exactly my way. You don't skip steps, you don't rush it, and if I say stop, we stop. Understood?" "Understood." She stood up. "Tomorrow night, after everyone's asleep, we'll start with an assessment." "An assessment?" "I need to see what we're working with. How much feeling you've got, if any. Where the damage is." She headed for the door. "And eat your damn dinner. You need your strength." That night, Mara barely slept. She kept reading her father's notes, cross-referencing symptoms and treatments, trying to remember everything he'd taught her before he died. Spinal injuries were tricky. Sometimes the damage was structural. Bone fragments, severed nerves, things that couldn't be healed with herbs and hot water. But sometimes Sometimes it was inflammation, pressure, muscles that had seized up and forgotten how to let go. The body remembers, her father had written, but sometimes it needs reminding. The next night, after Caleb had locked himself in his office and the ranch hands were in the bunkhouse, Mara slipped upstairs with a basin of warm water, a towel, and a small cloth bag filled with herbs. Her hands shook as she knocked on Elias's door. He answered immediately. "You came." "Said I would." She set everything down. "Lie on the bed, on your stomach." He maneuvered himself out of the wheelchair, practiced, efficient, like he'd done it 1,000 times. His legs dragged uselessly behind him. Once he was positioned, Mara pulled back the blanket. His legs were thin, too thin. Muscles atrophied from disuse. She pressed her fingers against his calf, feeling for tension, for any sign of, "I can't feel that," Elias said. "I know." She moved her hands higher, thigh, hip, lower back. "Tell me if you feel anything. Pressure, heat, tingling. Anything." "Nothing." She worked in silence, methodical, checking every inch. His spine felt wrong, not broken, but tight. Muscles bunched up around the vertebrae like they were trying to protect something. Classic inflammation response. If that's all it was, if the nerves weren't severed. "There," Elias gasped. "I felt that." Mara's hands had been pressing against his lower back, just above the hips. "Felt what?" "Pressure, I think. It was faint, but don't move." She pressed again, same spot. "Now?" "Yeah, it's like someone's pushing, dull, but it's there." Something in Mara's chest cracked open. Hope, maybe. Or just the memory of her father's hands guiding hers, showing her how to find the places where the body held its pain. She soaked the towel in warm water, wrung it out, added a few drops of the herbal mixture. Arnica for inflammation. Lavender for muscle tension. She laid the towel across his lower back. "That's hot," Elias said. "Good. That means your nerves are working." She worked for an hour. Heat, pressure, massage. Slowly, carefully, trying to coax the muscles into relaxing. Trying to reduce whatever inflammation was pressing on his spine. Elias didn't say much, just lay there breathing hard, occasionally gasping when she hit a tender spot. Finally, she stopped. "That's enough for tonight." "Did it work?" "Too early to tell. How do you feel?" He was quiet for a moment. "Tired, and, I don't know, different." "Different how?" "I can't explain it, just different." Mara helped him back into the wheelchair. "We'll do this again tomorrow, and the next night. It's going to take time." "I have time." But they didn't. Not really. 3 days later, Caleb noticed. Mara was in the kitchen when he slammed the door open, face like a thunderstorm. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded. She didn't pretend not to know. "Helping your son." "I told you to stay out of his room." "And I ignored you." He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, got right in her face. "You think you're some kind of miracle worker? You think you can fix him when real doctors couldn't?" "I don't know if I can fix him," Mara said, standing her ground. "But I'm damn sure trying, which is more than you're doing." The slap came fast. Not hard enough to knock her down, but hard enough to snap her head to the side. Her cheek burned. "You're fired," Caleb said, voice shaking. "Pack your things. Be gone by morning." Mara touched her cheek, felt the heat there. She should have been scared, should have backed down. Instead, she heard herself say, "Your son felt pressure 3 nights ago, in his lower back. Last night, he felt tingling in his left thigh. This morning, he told me his toes twitched." Caleb froze. "I don't know if it'll last," Mara continued. "I don't know if he'll ever walk again, but something's happening. And if you throw me out now, you'll never know if I could have helped him." For a long moment, Caleb just stared at her. Then he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. Mara stood there, heart pounding, cheek throbbing. She didn't pack, didn't leave. And that night, when she went upstairs, Elias was waiting. "My dad hit you," he said. Wasn't a question. "Yeah. I'm sorry." "Not your fault." She set down her supplies. "You ready?" "Wait." Elias grabbed her wrist. His grip was weak but desperate. "What you said to him." About me feeling things. Was that true? Or were you just trying to stay? Mara looked at him. This kid who'd been lied to by everyone, who'd learned not to trust hope because hope just made the fall hurt worse. It was true, she said. Every word. His eyes filled with tears. I felt my toes move this morning. I thought I was imagining it. But I wasn't, was I? No, you weren't. He started crying then. Really crying. The kind of sobs that came from 2 years of locked-away grief. Mara let him, didn't try to comfort him, didn't tell him everything would be okay, just stood there and let him break. When he finally stopped, she said, "We've got work to do." They worked every night after that. Heat and pressure and herbs, hour after hour, while Caleb brooded downstairs and the ranch slept around them. Progress came in inches, a toe that curled, a muscle that twitched. Sensation spreading slowly down from his hips, patchy and inconsistent, but there. And then, 2 weeks in, Elias screamed. Mara jerked back. "What? What's wrong?" "My leg!" He was gasping, tears streaming down his face. "It hurts! Oh God, it hurts!" Pain. He was feeling pain. Mara grabbed his hand. "That's good. That's your nerves waking up. I know it hurts, but it's good." "It doesn't feel good." "I know." She squeezed his hand. "Breathe through it. It'll pass." It took 20 minutes for the pain to fade to a manageable ache. By then, Elias was exhausted, drenched in sweat. "That was the worst thing I've ever felt," he said. "Yeah. Can we do it again tomorrow?" Mara smiled. "Yeah." But the next morning, everything went to hell. The doctor arrived just after breakfast. Dr. Richard Pembroke from town, the kind of man who wore his education like armor. He swept into the ranch with Caleb at his heels, took one look at Mara, and said, "You're the woman treating the boy." Not a question. "I'm helping him," Mara said carefully. "Helping?" Pembroke's smile was knife-sharp. "With what credentials? What medical training?" "I didn't say I was a doctor." "No, but you're acting like one. Treating a spinal injury without any medical license, without supervision, using, what, folk remedies, old wives' tales?" "It's working." "Is it?" He turned to Caleb. "Has she shown you any proof? Any documented improvement?" Caleb's face was unreadable. "Elias says he's feeling things." "The boy is desperate," Pembroke said. "He'd say anything if he thought it meant he could walk again. This woman is giving him false hope, and worse, she could be causing permanent damage." "I'm not," Mara started. "You have no idea what you're doing," Pembroke cut her off. "Spinal injuries are complex. One wrong move, one bad treatment, and you could paralyze him further, or kill him." The kitchen went silent. "I've filed a complaint with the county," Pembroke continued, "practicing medicine without a license. If she continues, I'll have her arrested." Mara's blood turned to ice. "You can't." "I can, and I will." He looked at Caleb. "Send her away. Today. Before she does irreparable harm." Caleb stood there, caught between his son's impossible hope and the weight of the law. Finally, he said, "Mara, upstairs, now." She followed him, heart sinking. In the hallway, Caleb rounded on her. "Tell me the truth. Is it working, or are you just stringing him along?" "It's working." "Prove it." "I can't, not yet. It takes time." "We don't have time." He slammed his fist against the wall. "That doctor will have you in jail by tomorrow if you don't stop. And if you're wrong, if you've been giving Elias false hope this whole time, I'll show you," Mara said desperately. "Tonight. I'll show you proof." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "What kind of proof?" "Trust me. Please." He stared at her for a long moment. Then finally, he nodded. "One chance. That's all you get." That night, Mara worked on Elias with a desperation she'd never felt before. Heat, pressure, massage, every technique her father had ever taught her. Elias gritted his teeth through the pain, through the exhaustion, trusting her with everything he had. "I need you to try something," she said finally. "I need you to try to move your leg. Not your whole leg, just your foot. Flex it, just a little." "I've tried 1,000 times." "Try again." He closed his eyes, concentrated. His face went red with effort. Nothing happened. "Again," Mara said. Still nothing. Elias, I'm trying. His voice cracked. I'm trying, but it's not. His right foot twitched, just barely, just a flutter of movement, but it was there. They both froze. Did you see that? Elias whispered. Yeah. Mara's voice shook. Do it again. He tried, failed, tried again. This time the foot moved more, an actual flex, toes curling inward. Oh my God, Elias breathed. Oh my God, I'm doing it. Mara ran for the door. Caleb, get up here! Footsteps pounded up the stairs. Caleb burst into the room, Dr. Pembroke right behind him. Apparently he'd been downstairs waiting to watch Mara fail. What's going on? Caleb demanded. Watch, Mara said. Elias was shaking, but he focused, concentrated. And slowly, painfully, his right foot flexed. Then his left. Both feet moving, toes curling, the blanket shifting with the movement. Caleb made a sound like he'd been punched. Dr. Pembroke went pale. That's not possible. It's happening, Mara said. Elias looked up at his father, tears streaming down his face. Dad, I'm moving them. I'm actually moving them. Caleb crossed the room in 2 strides, dropped to his knees beside the bed, put his hand on his son's foot. Do it again. Elias did. The foot pressed against Caleb's palm, and Caleb Hadley, the hardest man Mara had ever met, started crying. Dr. Pembroke stammered something about needing to observe, to document, but nobody was listening to him anymore. Caleb had his arms around his son, and Elias was laughing through his tears, and Mara stood in the doorway watching something impossible become real. Later, after Pembroke had left, still sputtering about medical impossibilities, Caleb found Mara in the kitchen. I don't understand, he said quietly. The doctors said it was permanent. How did you... I told you, my father was a healer. But this... He shook his head. This is beyond anything I've ever seen. Mara was silent for a moment. Then she said, This land, 4,000 acres. What was here before you bought it? My father bought it, 30 years ago, from a family that couldn't pay their debts. Why? What was the family's name? Caleb frowned. I don't know, some drifter. Why does it... He stopped, stared at her. Voss. The name was Voss. Yeah, Mara met his eyes. My father's name was Thomas Voss, and this ranch, all 4,000 acres, belonged to him before your father took it. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 30 years of lies and buried truth. So that's why you're here, Caleb said finally. Revenge. No, Mara turned away. I came here because I needed work. I stayed because your son needed help. Everything else is just everything else. If what you're saying is true, it is. Then my father stole this land from yours. Yeah. Caleb was quiet for a long time. Then he said, What do you want? Right now, I want to keep helping your son. The rest, we'll figure out later. He nodded slowly. Okay. But Mara, if you're lying to me, if any of this is some kind of con, it's not. Then prove it. Show me the deed. Show me proof that this land belonged to your father. I don't have the deed. It was lost when he died. But there are records, county records. If you look, I'll look, Caleb said. And if you're telling the truth, then we'll settle this. Properly. He left her standing there in the kitchen, surrounded by the smell of her father's land and the ghost of everything that had been stolen. Upstairs, through the ceiling, she could hear Elias laughing. Actually laughing. For the first time in 8 years, Mara thought maybe, just maybe, the body really could remember. And maybe some things could be healed after all. The celebration lasted exactly 1 night. By morning, reality set in like frost on glass. Sharp, cold, undeniable. Elias could move his feet. That was a miracle. But moving your feet and walking were 2 entirely different things, separated by months of brutal work that nobody wanted to talk about. Mara knew it. Caleb knew it. Even Elias, in the bright morning light filtering through his window, knew it too. How long? He asked her during their first session the next day. His voice was different now, still young, but edged with something harder. Determination, maybe, or fear that this progress was as far as it went. Mara pressed her fingers against his calf, feeling the muscle twitch weakly under her touch. Months, maybe longer. The doctor's coming back tomorrow, Dad told me. I know. He's going to try to stop you again. Let him try. Mara added more herbs to the hot water, the smell of arnica filling the room. Your feet moved. That's proof enough. For you, maybe. Elias shifted on the bed, wincing as a muscle spasmed. But Pembroke doesn't care about proof. He cares about being right, and if you make him look like a fool, he made himself look like a fool. She wrung out the towel, laid it across his lower back. All I did was help you. But Elias was right. Dr. Pembroke showed up the next afternoon with 2 other men, another doctor from Billings and some county official with a briefcase full of papers. They took over the dining room, spread their documents across Caleb's table like they owned the place. Mara wasn't invited to defend herself, wasn't even told they were coming until she heard voices through the wall. She pressed her ear against the door, listening. The boy's progress is anecdotal at best, Pembroke was saying. Muscle spasms are common in paralysis cases. They mean nothing. He moved his feet on command, Caleb said. His voice was tight, controlled. I saw it myself. Psychosomatic response, the power of suggestion. This woman has convinced your son he's healing, so his body produces involuntary reactions. It's well documented. That's bullshit, and you know it. Mr. Hadley, I understand you want to believe. I don't want to believe anything. I want my son to walk again, and she's the only person who's given him a chance. The doctor from Billings spoke up, calmer than Pembroke. What exactly is her treatment protocol? What methods is she using? Silence. Mara could picture Caleb's face, the way his jaw tightened when he didn't know the answer. Heat therapy, Caleb said finally. And massage. Some kind of herbs. Folk medicine, Pembroke said with undisguised contempt. Unproven, unscientific, and dangerous. Dr. Morrison, you've reviewed the initial scans from 2 years ago. What's your assessment? Papers rustled. Complete severance of nerve pathways at L4 to L5. The prognosis was clear, permanent paralysis below the waist. If this woman is claiming otherwise, she's either delusional or fraudulent. Or she's actually helping him, Caleb said. Mr. Hadley, the county official now, voice oily with bureaucratic sympathy. We understand this is difficult, but Ms. Voss is practicing medicine without a license. That's a criminal offense. If her treatments cause further injury, they're not causing injury, they're working. Are they? Pembroke leaned in for the kill. Or are you so desperate to see progress that you're imagining it? Mara heard something slam, Caleb's fist on the table, probably. Get out! Mr. Hadley, I said get out. All of you, get off my property. We're trying to help. You're trying to cover your ass because you told me my son would never walk again, and now he's moving his feet. That's what this is about. Your pride. This is about the law, the county official said. Ms. Voss has 48 hours to cease all treatment, or we'll have her arrested. That's not a threat, Mr. Hadley. That's a legal fact. Footsteps. The front door opening. Mara scrambled away from the kitchen door, made herself busy at the sink as the 3 men filed past, Pembroke shooting her a look of pure venom. After they left, Caleb stood in the doorway, looking like he'd aged 10 years in an hour. 48 hours, he said. I heard. If you don't stop treating Elias, they'll arrest you. And if they arrest you... He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Mara dried her hands on a towel, kept her voice level. What do you want me to do? I don't know. He ran a hand through his hair, exhausted. If you keep going, you go to jail. If you stop, Elias loses his chance. There's no good option here. There's always an option. She turned to face him. Question is, what are you willing to risk? What am I? He let out a harsh laugh. I'm not the one going to jail. No, but you're the one who has to live with the decision. She met his eyes. Your son is getting better every day a little more. You saw what I saw, so either you believe it's real or you believe Pembroke. It's not that simple. Yeah, it is. Caleb stared at her, and for a moment she saw the crack in his armor, the fear underneath all that hardness. fear that hope was dangerous, fear that believing in something impossible would just make the fall that much worse. "The land," he said abruptly. "The deed. I looked into it." Mara's stomach tightened. "And?" "County records show my father purchased 4,000 acres from a Thomas Voss in March of 1996, paid in full. No dispute on record. Because your father promised to hold the land in trust until I was old enough to claim it." Her voice shook despite herself. "My father was dying. Lung disease. He knew he wouldn't make it, so he made a deal with yours. Sell the land cheap with the agreement that I'd get it back when I turned 25. There was supposed to be a contract, a legal document. I haven't found one." "Of course you haven't. Your father buried it." "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "Even if you're right, and I'm not saying you are, that was 30 years ago. The statute of limitations—" "I don't care about the statute of limitations," Mara said. "I care that your father lied to mine. I care that I spent 8 years drifting from ranch to ranch because the land that should have been mine got stolen. And I care that you're standing here trying to decide if your son's recovery is worth more than your family's reputation. That's not fair. Life's not fair. You should know that by now." They stood there in the kitchen, the weight of 30 years pressing down between them. Finally, Caleb said, "If I let you keep treating Elias, if I fight Pembroke and the county, they'll come after both of us. They'll dig into everything, your past, my father's business dealings, all of it. Good, let them dig. Let them—" "You don't know what you're asking." "Yeah, I do." Mara's hands clenched into fists. "I'm asking you to choose your son over your pride. That's it." Caleb's jaw worked. 48 hours. That's all we've got. Then we'd better use them. That night, Mara and Elias worked harder than ever before. She pushed him past pain, past exhaustion, until sweat soaked through his shirt, and he was shaking with effort. But the progress was undeniable. His feet didn't just twitch now, they flexed, toes curled, ankles rotated, small movements, but real. "I can feel it," Elias gasped during a particularly brutal stretch. "It burns, like fire up my legs." "That's good. That's your nerves reconnecting." Mara didn't let up on the pressure, fingers digging into the knotted muscles along his spine. "Don't fight it. Breathe through it. It hurts." "I know." "Is it supposed to hurt this much?" "Yeah." She eased off slightly, gave him a moment to catch his breath. "Your body's been asleep for 2 years. Waking up isn't gentle." He was quiet for a moment, just breathing hard. Then he said, "My dad told me what you said, about the land." Mara's hand stilled. "He did?" "Yeah, is it true? Did his father steal it from yours?" "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because it didn't matter." She resumed the massage, working a particularly tight knot near his hip. "Still doesn't." "How can you say that? If my grandfather—" "Your grandfather's dead. My father's dead. The land's been in your family's name for 30 years. Fighting about it now doesn't change anything." "But if you have proof—" "I don't have proof, just my father's word, and he's not here to back it up." Her voice hardened. "All I have is what I can do right now, in this room. That's it." Elias turned his head, trying to see her face. "You really don't care about getting the land back?" "I care, but I care more about this." She pressed hard against his spine, felt the muscle release under her fingers. "You moving, you walking, that matters more than some old debt." "Why?" She didn't answer right away. Kept working, kept pushing, until finally she said, "Because my father spent his whole life helping people who couldn't pay him back. Farmers who'd lost everything, ranch hands with broken bodies. He never asked for anything except to be left alone to do the work. And when he died, they buried him in a pauper's grave because he didn't have $2 to his name." Her hands moved to his lower back, finding the inflammation that never quite went away. "So if I can help you walk again, if I can do what the doctors said was impossible, then maybe all that suffering meant something. Maybe he didn't die for nothing." Elias was crying. She could tell by the hitch in his breathing, the way his shoulders shook. "I'm going to walk again," he said. "I don't care what Pembroke says. I don't care if they arrest you. I'm going to stand up and walk out of this room. Yeah, you are. Mara's own eyes burned, but she blinked the tears back. Now shut up and let me work. They worked until past midnight. When Mara finally left his room, Caleb was waiting in the hallway. How is he? Caleb asked. Getting stronger. Another week and he might be able to support his own weight. We don't have a week, we have 36 hours. Then I'll push harder. Caleb grabbed her arm as she moved past. Don't push him so hard he breaks. He won't break. You don't know that. I know that kid wants to walk more than he wants to breathe. I know he'll do whatever it takes. And I know if we stop now, he'll spend the rest of his life wondering what could have been. She pulled her arm free. So yeah, I'm going to push. And you're going to let me. Caleb stared at her, then slowly nodded. If this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, then I'll take the blame. I'll tell them you tried to stop me, that I snuck into his room against orders. I'll make sure it doesn't come back on you or Elias. That's not what I was going to say. He looked away, jaw tight. If this goes wrong, I'll never forgive myself for letting you try. Mara didn't know what to say to that, so she just went downstairs and collapsed in her small room above the kitchen, too tired to even take off her boots. The next day started with a knock at the door just after dawn. Mara was making breakfast when Caleb answered it, and she heard a woman's voice, sharp, authoritative. Mr. Hadley, I'm Sarah Chen from Child Protective Services. I need to speak with you about your son. Mara's blood turned to ice. Caleb's voice was carefully neutral. What about him? We've received a complaint that he's being subjected to dangerous medical treatment by an unlicensed practitioner. I'm here to conduct a welfare check. My son is fine. I'll need to verify that myself. May I come in? There was a pause, then footsteps. Mara stayed in the kitchen, hands gripping the counter. This was it. Pembroke had escalated. He wasn't just threatening arrest anymore. He was going after Elias directly. The social worker was young, maybe 30, with the kind of professional concern that came from seeing too many bad situations. She introduced herself to Mara with polite coldness, then asked to see Elias. He's sleeping, Caleb said. I'll wait. So they waited. Mara served coffee that nobody drank. The social worker made notes on a clipboard, asked questions about Elias's daily routine, his medical history, his current condition. Caleb answered carefully, giving away as little as possible. Finally, Elias wheeled himself into the kitchen, still in his pajamas. He looked between the adults, reading the tension immediately. What's going on? He asked. This is Ms. Chen, Caleb said. She's here to check on you. Why? Sarah Chen's smile was professionally warm. I just want to make sure you're doing okay, Elias, that you're being taken care of properly. I'm fine. I hear you've been receiving medical treatment. Can you tell me about that? Elias's eyes flicked to Mara, then back to the social worker. Mara's helping me. Helping you how? Physical therapy? Heat treatment? Massage. He said it carefully, like he'd been coached, which Mara realized he had been, by himself, figuring out what to say to protect her. And has it been helping? Yeah. I can move my feet now. Want to see? Before anyone could stop him, Elias pulled back the blanket covering his legs, concentrated. His right foot flexed, toes curling, then his left, both feet moving in unison. Sarah Chen's pen stopped moving. That's impressive. The doctor said I'd never move them again, said the damage was permanent. Elias's voice was steady, but Mara could hear the anger underneath. They gave up on me. Mara didn't. I see. The social worker made more notes. And your father approves of this treatment? Caleb spoke before Elias could. Yes. Even though the practitioner has no medical license? She's not practicing medicine. She's providing physical therapy. That's a legal distinction I'm not qualified to make. Sarah Chen closed her notebook. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to file my report. I'll recommend that Elias receive an evaluation from a licensed physical therapist to determine if Ms. Voss's methods are appropriate. Until then, I'm not removing him from the home. But if I receive another complaint, if there's any indication of harm, I'll have no choice but to intervene. There won't be any harm, Elias said fiercely. Mara's the only person who's actually helped me. I'm glad to hear that. The social worker stood, gathered her things. Mr. Hadley, I'll be in touch. After she left, the three of them sat in silence. Finally, Caleb said, "They're tightening the noose." "Let them," Mara said. "We've got one more night. Let's make it count." But that afternoon, everything accelerated. A sheriff's deputy showed up with a cease and desist order. Mara was officially barred from providing any medical treatment to Elias Hadley, effective immediately. Violation would result in arrest and prosecution. Caleb read the order twice, then crumpled it in his fist. "This is garbage." "Doesn't matter if it's garbage," the deputy said. He looked uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. "It's legally binding. I'm sorry, Caleb. I really am." After the deputy left, Mara found Elias in his room, staring out the window. His hands were clenched on the armrests of his wheelchair, knuckles white. "So that's it?" he said without turning around. "We just give up." "We don't have a choice." "There's always a choice." He spun the chair around, and his face was harder than she'd ever seen it. "You told my dad that. Now I'm telling you." "Elias, I can feel my legs. Not just tingles anymore. Real feeling. I can feel the fabric of my pants, the cold from the floor. Yesterday I felt the rug under my foot when I moved it. Do you understand what that means?" "Yeah, it means you're healing. It means we're close, really close." He wheeled himself toward her. "One more week. Maybe two. And I think I could stand. I think I could actually stand. And if we push too hard and you get hurt, they'll take you away from here. Put you in a medical facility where I can't help you at all." Mara knelt down to his level. "I'm not risking that." "So you're just going to let them win? Let Pembroke and his ego destroy the only chance I've got?" "I'm trying to protect you." "I don't need protection." He was yelling now, voice cracking. "I need to walk. I need my life back, and you're the only person who can give me that. But you're too scared to—" He stopped, took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "That wasn't fair." "It's okay." "No, it's not. You've risked everything for me. Your freedom, your safety, everything. And I'm sitting here yelling at you like some spoiled kid." He wiped his eyes roughly. I was so close. We were so close." Mara stood up, her own throat tight. "I know." That night she didn't sleep. Just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the ranch settle around her. She thought about her father, about the notebooks hidden in her bag. Thought about Elias upstairs, probably not sleeping either. Thought about the choice she'd made 30 years ago to let the land go, to survive instead of fight. She'd been 19, alone, scared, and she'd chosen survival. But now... Mara got out of bed, pulled on her boots, grabbed the bag with her father's notebooks and supplies. Caleb was in his office, working through a bottle of bourbon. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway. "I'm going to keep treating him," Mara said. Caleb set down his glass. "They'll arrest you." "Probably." "Definitely. First violation, they'll haul you straight to county lockup." "I know." "So why?" "Because your son is right. We're close, really close. And if I stop now, all of this, all the pain, all the progress, it's for nothing." She stepped into the office. "I'm going to give him one more treatment tonight. The strongest one I know. It's risky. It's going to hurt like hell. But if it works, if we can get him to stand even for a second, then nobody can say it's psychosomatic. Nobody can deny what's happening. And if it doesn't work, then I'll turn myself in tomorrow and save them the trouble of coming to get me." Caleb studied her for a long moment. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the stupidest. Can it be both?" He almost smiled. "What do you need from me?" "Time. And if something goes wrong, if the pain gets too bad, I need you to trust me to know when to stop." "Okay. Okay? You've gotten this far. I'm not going to second guess you now." He stood up, grabbed his jacket. "I'll keep watch. If anyone shows up, I'll stall them as long as I can." Mara nodded, then went upstairs. Elias was awake, sitting up in bed. "I heard you talking to my dad." "Course you did." She set down her supplies, started preparing. "What I'm about to do is going to be the most painful thing you've ever felt. Worse than when the nerves woke up. Worse than anything." "I don't care." "You will. About 5 minutes in, you're going to beg me to stop." "I won't." "You will. and I'm going to keep going anyway unless I think you're in actual danger. So I need you to trust me. Can you do that? He met her eyes. Yeah. Good. She soaked the towels in water so hot steam rose from the basin, added twice the normal amount of herbs. Lie down, on your stomach, on your up. And whatever happens, don't scream loud enough to wake the ranch hands. That's really comforting. Wasn't trying to be comforting. She worked for 3 hours straight, heat so intense it left red marks on his skin, pressure so deep she felt bones shift under her fingers. Elias bit down on a leather strap to keep from screaming, tears streaming down his face, whole body shaking, but he didn't tell her to stop, not once. Mara pushed deeper, finding the core of the inflammation that had been strangling his nerves for 2 years. It felt like a knot of scar tissue, hard and unyielding. She worked it from every angle, using techniques her father had only described in his notebooks, things she'd never tried before. Almost there, she muttered, more to herself than to him. Just a little more. Elias made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh, impossible to tell. And then something released. She felt it under her fingers, a sudden give, like a dam breaking. Elias went rigid, every muscle in his body locking up. Then he screamed, not loud. He'd promised not to wake anyone, but it tore out of him anyway, raw and primal. Elias, don't stop. His voice was barely recognizable. Don't you dare stop. She didn't. Kept working, kept pushing, even as his body convulsed with pain. And slowly, gradually, the inflammation began to recede. She could feel it, the pressure easing, the muscles relaxing. Finally, she pulled back. That's it. That's all I can do. Elias lay there gasping, drenched in sweat. Did it work? I don't know. Try to move. He closed his eyes, concentrated. His right leg shifted. Not just the foot, the whole leg. Knee bent, heel dragged across the sheet. Oh my God, he whispered. Other leg. The left leg moved. Slower, weaker, but it moved. Mara sat back, her own hands shaking. How does it feel? Like my legs are on fire. Like every nerve is screaming. He laughed, high and slightly hysterical. It's the best thing I've ever felt. Think you can sit up? I can try. With her help, he maneuvered himself upright. His legs dangled off the edge of the bed, and for the first time in 2 years, he could feel the floor beneath his feet. I want to stand, he said. Not tonight. You're exhausted, and your muscles aren't strong enough yet. I want to try. Elias, please. Mara looked at this kid who'd endured more pain tonight than most people felt in a lifetime, who'd trusted her with everything he had, and she couldn't say no. Okay, but I'm holding you up, all your weight on me. Understood? Understood. She braced herself, got her arms under his shoulders. On 3. 1, 2, 3. They stood together. Mara took all his weight, but his legs were there, trembling but present, trying to support him. He lasted maybe 5 seconds before his knees buckled, and she lowered him back to the bed. But for those 5 seconds, Elias Hadley had been standing. He was crying again, but this time from joy. I did it. I actually did it. You did. Mara's own voice was unsteady. Now rest. Your body needs to recover. When can we try again? Tomorrow, if the sheriff doesn't drag me away first. But Elias was already asleep, exhaustion finally claiming him. Mara cleaned up, packed her supplies, and went downstairs. Caleb was waiting in the kitchen, still awake despite the late hour. How did it go? He asked. He stood. Just for a few seconds, but he stood. Caleb closed his eyes, and for a moment he looked like he might cry. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We've still got a knock at the door. Hard, official. They both froze. Sheriff's Department, a voice called. We have a warrant for the arrest of Mara Voss. Caleb looked at her. You could run, out the back, take one of the horses. And then what? Spend the rest of my life hiding? Mara shook her head. No. I knew this was coming. She opened the door. 2 deputies stood there, looking uncomfortable. Mara Voss, one of them said, That's me. You're under arrest for practicing medicine without a license. You have the right to remain silent. The words washed over her as they put her in handcuffs. She looked back at Caleb, standing in the doorway of the ranch that used to belong to her father. Take care of him, she said. Caleb nodded. I will. And Mara, I'll get you out. Whatever it takes. They led her to the patrol car, and as they drove away, Mara looked back at the ranch disappearing into the darkness. She'd come here for work, stayed for a boy who needed help, and now she was going to jail for it. But Elias had stood. For 5 impossible seconds, he had stood. That had to be worth something. The county jail smelled like bleach and desperation. Mara sat on a thin mattress in a cell, barely bigger than a closet, staring at cinder block walls painted the kind of institutional beige that made you forget what color was. They'd processed her at 3 a.m, fingerprints, mugshot, paperwork. Stripped her of everything except the clothes on her back. Her father's notebooks were gone, locked away in an evidence locker somewhere. The thought made her chest tight. She'd been in worse places. That's what she told herself. But knowing didn't make the walls feel any less close. Morning came with the rattle of keys and a guard who looked too young to be doing this job. He brought watery coffee and something that might have been eggs once. Mara ate because not eating was stupid, not because she tasted anything. You got a lawyer? The guard asked. No. Court'll appoint you one. Arraignment's at 2. Great. He left her alone after that. The morning dragged. Mara counted cracks in the ceiling, 37. Listened to other inmates talking through the walls, one woman crying, another singing something off-key and broken, the sounds of people who'd run out of options. She thought about Elias, whether he'd woken up sore, whether his legs still worked, or if the progress had vanished overnight like a dream. She thought about Caleb, probably pacing the ranch house, trying to figure out how to fix this. She thought about Pembroke, smug and satisfied now that the problem had been removed. At 1:30, they brought her to a holding room. The court-appointed lawyer showed up 10 minutes later, a tired woman in her 50s with a briefcase held together by duct tape and optimism. Margaret Reeves, she said, offering a hand. I'll be representing you. Mara shook it. Lucky me. Could be worse. Could be Jerry Thompson, and he shows up drunk half the time. Margaret pulled out a legal pad covered in cramped notes. Okay, let's talk about what we're dealing with. You're charged with practicing medicine without a license. It's a misdemeanor in Montana, but given that the alleged patient is a minor with a serious medical condition, the prosecutor might push for enhanced penalties. How enhanced? Up to a year in county, plus fines. That's worst case. She flipped a page. But here's the thing. They have to prove you were actually practicing medicine. Physical therapy, massage therapy, those aren't regulated the same way. If we can argue you were providing alternative wellness services with the parent's consent, the parent consented. Caleb Hadley. He's the boy's father. Good. That helps. Margaret made a note. What exactly were you doing? Treatment-wise? Mara described it. Heat therapy, herbal compresses, pressure point massage. Techniques her father had taught her, passed down through generations. She left out the part about the land, about her history with the Hadley family. Figured that complication could wait. Margaret listened, pen moving across the page. And the boy showed improvement? He could move his feet, then his legs. Last night he stood up. Last night? Margaret looked up. After the cease and desist order? Yeah. Damn it, she rubbed her forehead. That's not going to help. They'll say you were deliberately defying a court order. I was helping a kid who needed help. I know, but the law doesn't care about noble intentions. She closed her notebook. Look, I'll do my best at the arraignment. We'll enter a not guilty plea, ask for reasonable bail. But Mara, you need to understand, this isn't just about the charges. There's politics here. Dr. Pembroke's got pull in this county. He wants to make an example of you. Let him try. Margaret gave her a look that might have been respect or might have been pity. That's the spirit? Just try not to say anything that'll make my job harder. The arraignment was held in a courtroom that had seen better decades. Wood paneling dark with age, fluorescent lights that hummed like angry wasps, a judge who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Mara stood next to Margaret, hands cuffed in front of her, while the prosecutor, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a mouth like a paper cut, read the charges. The state charges Mara Voss with practicing medicine without a license, in violation of Montana Code annotated section 37-3-301. The defendant, despite having no medical training or licensure, provided medical treatment to a minor child suffering from paralysis, in direct contradiction of medical advice and in defiance of a legal cease and desist order. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Harriet Kowalski, looked at Mara over her reading glasses. "How do you plead?" "Not guilty," Margaret said. "Noted. Bail?" The prosecutor stood up. "Your Honor, the state requests remand without bail. The defendant has no ties to this community, no permanent residence, and a history of transient employment. She's a flight risk." "That's ridiculous," Margaret shot back. "Ms. Voss has been employed at the Hadley Ranch for nearly 2 months. She's not going anywhere." "She was arrested while actively violating a court order, Your Honor. She's shown a willful disregard for the law." Judge Kowalski tapped her pen against the bench. "I'm inclined to agree with the state. Ms. Voss, you don't exactly inspire confidence in your willingness to follow legal restrictions." "Your Honor, if I may—" Margaret started. The courtroom door banged open. Everyone turned. Caleb Hadley stood in the doorway, dressed in the same clothes he'd been wearing last night, looking like he hadn't slept. Behind him, in a wheelchair, was Elias. The judge frowned. "This is a closed proceeding. You can't—" "I'm the father of the alleged victim," Caleb said, walking down the aisle. "I have a right to be here." "Mr. Hadley, this is highly irregular. So is arresting the woman who helped my son walk." Caleb stopped in front of the bench. Elias wheeled up beside him. "My son was paralyzed for 2 years. Every doctor told us there was no hope. Then Mara Voss showed up, and everything changed." The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, this is not the time for testimony." "Let him speak," Judge Kowalski said. She was looking at Elias now, and something in her expression had softened. "Go ahead, Mr. Hadley." Caleb put a hand on Elias's shoulder. "Show them." Elias took a deep breath, gripped the armrests of his wheelchair, and slowly, shaking with effort, he pushed himself up. His legs trembled. His face went red. But he stood, both feet flat on the floor, knees locked, holding his own weight. The courtroom went silent. 5 seconds, Elias said through gritted teeth. "That's how long I can stand right now. Yesterday it was 3. The day before that I couldn't stand at all." He lowered himself back into the chair, breathing hard. Mara did that. Not the doctors. Not physical therapy. Her. Judge Kowalski stared. The prosecutor's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "So you can call it practicing medicine without a license," Caleb said. "You can throw her in jail if that makes you feel better. But my son is standing for the first time in 2 years, and that's because of her. You want to punish that? Go ahead. But I'll fight you every step of the way." The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Bail is set at $5,000. Miss Voss, you're restricted to the Hadley Ranch property until trial. Any violation and you're back in here. Understood?" "Yes, Your Honor," Mara said. "We'll reconvene in 2 weeks for a preliminary hearing." She banged her gavel. "Next case." Outside the courthouse, Mara stood in the weak April sunlight, still processing what had just happened. Caleb had posted bail with cash, just pulled out a roll of hundreds like it was nothing. Now they stood on the steps while Elias sat in his wheelchair, looking pleased with himself. "You didn't have to do that," Mara said. "Yeah, I did." Caleb stuffed his hands in his pockets. "You saved my son. I'm not letting them lock you up for it." "The trial's still happening. They could still convict me." "Then we'll deal with it. But in the meantime, you're coming back to the ranch." "The judge said I'm restricted there anyway." "Good. Because we've got work to do." He nodded at Elias. "He can stand for 5 seconds. Let's make it 10. The drive back was quiet. Elias fell asleep in the truck, exhausted from the effort of standing in court. Caleb drove with his jaw tight, not saying much. Mara watched the landscape roll past, scrubland and fence posts and sky that went on forever. "I looked through my father's papers," Caleb said finally. "The old business records, deeds, contracts, all of it." Mara's stomach clenched. "And?" "Found something. A letter from your father to mine, dated March 1996. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket, handed it to her. Mara unfolded it with shaking hands. The paper was yellow with age, but her father's handwriting was still clear. She read it twice, barely breathing. Robert, I'm trusting you to keep your word. The land goes to Mara when she's 25. I don't have much time left, and I need to know she'll be taken care of. You promised. Don't let me down. Her father's signature at the bottom, shaky from illness. There's more, Caleb said. Found a response from my father. Never mailed it, just shoved it in a drawer. He pulled out another paper. This one was in different handwriting, blocky and aggressive. Thomas, plans change. Market's different than we discussed. I'm keeping the land. Take the money I already gave you and be grateful. Your daughter can make her own way. Mara's hands clenched, crumpling the paper. Bastard. Yeah, Caleb's voice was flat. My father was a lot of things. Honest wasn't one of them. So what now? You've got proof he lied. Proof the land should have been mine. Now we figure out how to fix it. He glanced at her. If you want it fixed. What's that supposed to mean? Means you could sue. Take it to court. Drag my family through the mud and probably win. He gripped the steering wheel. Or we could settle it between us. Private. No lawyers. Mara looked at the letters in her lap. 30 years of lies right there in black and white. She could destroy the Hadley family with this. Get her land back. Get justice for her father. But she thought about Elias, asleep in the back seat, about the progress they'd made together, about the choice between revenge and something better. We'll talk about it, she said finally. After the trial. After Elias can walk. Then we'll figure out the land. Caleb nodded. Fair enough. Back at the ranch, reality set in fast. Mara was on house arrest, which meant she couldn't leave the property. Couldn't go to town, couldn't see a lawyer, couldn't do anything except cook, clean, and work with Elias. The electronic ankle monitor they'd strapped on her was a constant reminder. One step past the property line and she'd be back in jail. But at least she could work. That first night back, she and Elias picked up where they'd left off. His legs were sore from standing in court, muscles screaming from the unaccustomed use. Mara worked them carefully, rebuilding strength, pushing but not too hard. How long do you think? Elias asked during a break. Until I can walk? Depends on how you define walking. Stand and shuffle across the room? Maybe 2 weeks. Actually walk heel to toe, no support? Month, maybe 2. I don't have 2 months. The trial's in 2 weeks. I know. If you get convicted, they'll take you away. Who's going to help me then? Mara didn't have an answer for that, so she just said, then we'd better make the most of the time we've got. They worked until midnight. Elias pushed himself harder than ever, fueled by desperation and fear. By the end of the session, he could stand for 10 seconds, 12 if he really concentrated, but it wasn't enough, not nearly enough. The next day brought a new complication. Dr. Pembroke showed up at the ranch, flanked by the social worker from before, and another doctor Mara didn't recognize. Caleb met them at the door, arms crossed. You're not coming in, he said. We have a court order for a medical evaluation, Pembroke said, waving a paper. Ms. Chen needs to verify that Elias hasn't been harmed by Ms. Voss's treatments. He's fine. We'll determine that. Pembroke tried to push past, but Caleb didn't move. You set foot on my property, and I'll have you arrested for trespassing. This is a legal order. I don't care if it's signed by the president. My son is recovering, and you're not going to mess that up with your ego and your... Dad, Elias's voice from the doorway. He'd wheeled himself there, was watching the confrontation. Let them in. Elias, if they want to evaluate me, fine, let them. I've got nothing to hide. Caleb looked like he wanted to argue, but finally stepped aside. The group filed into the living room. Pembroke had brought equipment. A stethoscope, blood pressure cuff, reflex hammer. He examined Elias with professional detachment while the other doctor took notes. Any pain? Pembroke asked. Some. Muscle soreness, mostly. Range of motion in the lower extremities? I can move my legs. Want me to show you? Please. Elias shifted in his wheelchair, then lifted his right leg, bent the knee, flexed his foot, did the same with the left leg. The movement was jerky, uncoordinated, but it was there. Pembroke's face was unreadable. Stand up. I don't think that's... The other doctor started. Stand up, Pembroke repeated. Elias gripped the armrests, pushed himself up, His legs shook violently, and Mara could see him struggling, but he held it. 5 seconds. 10, 15. Then his right knee buckled, and he dropped back into the chair, gasping. Pembroke made notes on his clipboard. The movement is consistent with involuntary muscle spasms, common in paralysis cases. Doesn't indicate true neurological recovery. That's bullshit, Elias said. I'm controlling it. I'm making my legs move. You believe you're controlling it, but the medical evidence said I'd never move again. You were wrong then, and you're wrong now. Pembroke's jaw tightened. Ms. Chen, I'm recommending that Elias be removed from this environment for his own safety. Ms. Voss's continued presence poses a risk. No. Sarah Chen was looking at Elias with something like wonder. No, I'm not recommending removal. Whatever's happening here, it's not harm. That boy just stood up. I saw it with my own eyes. It's a spasm. Dr. Pembroke, I've seen muscle spasms. That wasn't a spasm. That was deliberate movement. She closed her folder. My report will say that Elias is progressing under his current care. I see no reason to intervene. Pembroke looked like he'd been slapped. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. She nodded at Caleb. Mr. Hadley, I'll be in touch. After they left, Caleb poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and downed it in one swallow. That was close. Too close, Mara said. She was shaking, adrenaline still flooding her system. He's not going to stop, Pembroke. He'll keep coming until he finds a way to shut this down. Let him come. We've got 2 weeks. By the time the trial starts, Elias will be walking circles around that courtroom. That's a nice fantasy. It's not a fantasy. It's a goal. When Caleb poured another drink. You said 2 months for real walking. We've got 2 weeks, so we compress the timeline. It doesn't work like that. You can't rush healing. We don't have a choice. He met her eyes. If you get convicted, you go to jail. If you go to jail, Elias loses his only chance. So we make it happen faster. Mara wanted to argue, wanted to explain that bodies had their own pace, that pushing too hard could cause setbacks or injury, but she looked at Caleb's desperate face, at Elias in his wheelchair looking hopeful for the first time in years, and the words died in her throat. Okay, she said. We'll try. The next 2 weeks were brutal. Mara worked with Elias 4 hours every morning, 4 hours every evening. Heat therapy, massage, resistance training, balance exercises. She had him standing multiple times a day, holding onto furniture, trying to shift his weight from foot to foot. His legs screamed in protest, muscles that hadn't worked in 2 years suddenly being asked to do everything. He fell. A lot. Crashed to the floor when his knees gave out, when his balance failed, when exhaustion won. Mara caught him when she could, cushioned the falls when she couldn't. Caleb installed padding around the room, foam mats to absorb the impact. Again, Mara would say after each fall. And Elias, stubborn and desperate, would climb back into the wheelchair, rest for 5 minutes, then try again. By the end of the first week, he could stand for 30 seconds, could shift his weight, lift 1 foot slightly off the ground. Progress, but not enough. I need to walk, he said one night, lying on the bed while Mara worked the knots out of his calves. Not just stand, walk. You will. When? I don't know. The trial's in 7 days. I know. So what if I can't do it in time? What if... Then we deal with it. She pressed hard against a particularly tight muscle, felt it release. But giving up now guarantees failure. Keeping going at least gives us a chance. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Why are you doing this? Really? I told you, your father, not the land, not revenge. Why are you risking jail to help me walk? Mara's hand stilled. She thought about her father, about the people he'd helped for free, about the life he'd lived in service to others, and how it had left him with nothing in the end. Because somebody should have helped my father when he needed it, she said quietly. Somebody should have fought for him the way I'm fighting for you. But they didn't. So maybe if I can help you, it balances something, makes his life mean something. That's not your responsibility. I know, but I'm doing it anyway. Elias was quiet after that. But when Mara told him to try standing again, he pushed harder than ever. 3 days before the trial, Elias took his first step. It wasn't graceful, wasn't smooth. He gripped a walker that Caleb had bought in town, knuckles white with effort, shifted his weight onto his right leg, dragged his left foot forward maybe 6 inches, almost fell, caught himself, stood there breathing like he'd run a marathon. But it was a step. Mara had tears streaming down her face. Caleb was frozen in the doorway, looking like he'd witnessed something impossible. "Do it again," Mara said. Elias did. Right foot, left foot, 2 steps. Then his legs gave out and he collapsed into the wheelchair, shaking with exhaustion and joy. "I did it," he said, laughing. "I actually did it." "Yeah, you did." Mara knelt beside him. "Now rest. Tomorrow we work on going farther." But the next day brought disaster. Mara was in the kitchen when she heard the crash from upstairs. She took the stairs 3 at a time, found Elias on the floor of his room, face twisted in pain. "What happened?" "I was practicing, trying to take more steps. I fell wrong." He was cradling his left ankle. "I think I twisted it." Mara examined it carefully, already swelling, turning purple. Not broken, probably, but badly sprained. She helped him onto the bed, got ice, wrapped it tight. "How bad?" Elias asked. "Bad enough that you shouldn't be walking on it. The trial's in 2 days. I know. I have to walk. I have to show them, not on a sprained ankle. You'll make it worse." He slammed his fist against the mattress. "Damn it! I know you're frustrated. Frustrated. I'm 2 days away from the chance to save you, and I just screwed it up." His voice cracked. "This is my fault. If I hadn't been pushing so hard." "You didn't screw anything up. Accidents happen. Not helpful accidents. Not now." He looked at her, eyes red. "What if I can't walk in court? What if they convict you because I fell? Then I go to jail. It's not the end of the world." "It is for me." He was crying now. "You're the only person who ever believed I could get better, the only one who didn't give up. And I'm going to lose you because I was stupid and impatient and—" "Stop." Mara grabbed his shoulders. "Listen to me. You took steps yesterday. Actual steps. That's proof. That's more than anyone thought possible. But it's not enough." "Maybe not, but it's what we've got." She let him go, started repacking the ice. "So tomorrow, you rest that ankle. We ice it, we compress it, we do everything we can to reduce the swelling. And in court, you do whatever you can do, even if it's just standing, even if it's just moving your feet. We show them progress, and we hope it's enough." "And if it's not?" Mara didn't answer, because honestly, she didn't know. The night before the trial, Mara couldn't sleep. She lay in her small room, listening to the ranch settle, thinking about tomorrow. The prosecution would present their case, practicing medicine without a license, endangering a child, defying a court order. Open and shut. The only defense was that what she'd done had worked. But would that be enough? Around midnight, she heard footsteps on the stairs, then a knock on her door. "Come in," she said. Caleb entered, looking as sleepless as she felt. He sat down on the edge of her bed without asking. "Can't stop thinking," he said. "Yeah, me neither." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Caleb said, "The land. I've been thinking about what you said, about my father and your father, and the promise that got broken." "Caleb, let me finish." He pulled the letters from his pocket, the ones proving the agreement. "These should have gone to you 30 years ago. My father should have kept his word. He didn't, and I can't fix the past, but I can fix now." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you get convicted tomorrow, if they send you to jail, I'll make sure you get what's yours. 4,000 acres, transferred back to Mara Voss, legal and binding. It won't undo what my father did, but it's something." Mara stared at him. "Why?" "Because it's right, and because—" He looked away. "Because my son is standing because of you. That's worth more than land, worth more than pride, worth everything. I don't want your guilt, Caleb. It's not guilt, it's justice." He stood up, set the letters on her bed. "Think about it. But whatever happens tomorrow, I'm going to make this right." He left before she could respond. Mara sat there holding the letters, feeling the weight of 30 years in her hands. The morning of the trial came cold and gray. Mara dressed in the cleanest clothes she had, jeans and a button-up shirt, nothing fancy. Caleb brought the truck around. Elias was already in the passenger seat, ankle wrapped tight, face pale with pain and nerves. "You ready?" Caleb asked. "No," Mara said, "but let's go anyway." The courtroom was packed. News had spread. The woman who'd helped a paralyzed boy walk, on trial for doing it without permission. Half the county had shown up to watch. Mara saw Dr. Pembroke in the front row, looking confident. Saw Sarah Chen a few rows back, taking notes. Saw ranch hands from neighboring properties, people she'd never met but who'd heard the story. Judge Kowalski called the court to order. The prosecutor presented his case, methodical and damning. Testimony from Pembroke about medical standards, documentation of the cease and desist order. Evidence that Mara had no license, no credentials, no legal right to do what she'd done. Margaret cross-examined, but there wasn't much to challenge. The facts were the facts. Then it was the defense's turn. Margaret called Caleb first. He took the stand, swore the oath, and told his story. About Elias's accident, about the doctors saying nothing could be done, about Mara showing up and changing everything. "My son can move his legs now," Caleb said. "He can stand. He took steps yesterday before he sprained his ankle. None of that was possible before Mara came." "But she has no medical training," the prosecutor said on cross-examination. "How do you know her treatment was safe?" "Because I watched her. Every session. She was careful, methodical, professional. More professional than some doctors I've met." "That's not an answer to my question." "It's the only answer I've got." Then Margaret called Elias. He wheeled himself to the front of the courtroom, ankle propped up. The judge had to adjust the witness stand so he could see over it. He looked small up there, young and scared. But when he started talking, his voice was steady. "I was dead," he said. "Not literally, but close enough. Stuck in a wheelchair, stuck in my room, stuck in a life that wasn't going anywhere. Then Mara showed up and told me my legs weren't broken, just forgotten, and she was right." He demonstrated, moving his feet, flexing his ankles, bending his knees. The courtroom watched in silence. "I was supposed to be paralyzed forever," Elias said. "That's what every doctor told me. But I'm not. I'm getting better, and if you send Mara to jail for that, if you punish her for giving me my life back, then the law is broken, not her." The prosecutor tried to cross-examine, tried to suggest it was all psychosomatic, but Elias shut him down. "I can feel my legs," he said. "I can move them. I took steps. That's not in my head, that's real." Finally, Margaret called Mara. She took the stand, swore to tell the truth, and faced the courtroom full of people judging her. "Did you practice medicine without a license?" Margaret asked. "I provided physical therapy and natural healing techniques. I didn't diagnose diseases or prescribe medication." "Did you believe you were helping Elias?" "Yes." "Do you still believe that?" "Yes." The prosecutor stood for cross-examination. "Ms. Voss, do you have any medical credentials? Any training in physical therapy?" "No formal training." "Then how did you know what to do?" "My father taught me. He was a healer." "Not a doctor." "No, but he helped people anyway." "People you say he helped. Do you have proof?" Mara met his eyes. "No, most of them are dead now." "Convenient." The prosecutor paced. "So we're supposed to just take your word that these techniques work? That you're not just a charlatan preying on desperate people?" "Look at Elias," Mara said quietly. "That's your proof." "Or look at a desperate boy experiencing psychosomatic responses and muscle spasms that you've convinced him are progress." "I didn't convince him of anything. His legs work. That's a fact." The prosecutor smiled, sharp. "Then prove it. Have him walk across the courtroom." The room went silent. Margaret stood. "Your Honor, that's not a reasonable request. Elias has a sprained ankle." "Then let him try," the prosecutor said. "If Ms. Voss's treatment really worked, if this isn't just muscle spasms and wishful thinking, let the boy walk." Judge Kowalski looked at Elias. "Can you do it?" Elias met Mara's eyes. She saw the fear there, the pain, the desperation. His ankle was swollen, purple, barely able to bear weight, but she also saw determination. "Don't," she mouthed. He gripped the armrests of his wheelchair, pushed himself up. His legs shook. The injured ankle nearly buckled immediately, but he locked his knees, found his balance. Then he took a step. It was agony. Mara could see it in every line of his body, but he did it. Right foot forward, dragging the left behind. 1 step, 2, 3. The courtroom held its breath. On the 4th step, his ankle gave out. He started to fall. Caleb was there in an instant, catching him, lowering him to the floor. But Elias was laughing through the tears of pain. "Did you see that? Did you see?" The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel, calling for order. The prosecutor was shouting something. Margaret was on her feet, but all Mara could see was Elias on the floor, held by his father, grinning like he'd just won something impossible. Because he had. Judge Kowalski finally got control back. "Everyone sit down, now!" The noise died. Caleb helped Elias back into his wheelchair. The boy's face was gray with pain, but he was still smiling. "Counselors, approach," the judge said. Margaret and the prosecutor went to the bench. There was a hushed conversation Mara couldn't hear. Finally, they stepped back. Judge Kowalski looked at Mara. "Ms. Voss, what you did was reckless, potentially dangerous, and technically illegal." She paused. "But it worked. That boy just walked across my courtroom on a sprained ankle because you taught him how. So here's what's going to happen. I'm finding you guilty of practicing medicine without a license. That's the law, and I have to uphold it." Mara's heart sank. "However," the judge continued, "I'm sentencing you to time served plus 1 year probation. No jail time. No fines. You don't practice medicine again. You stay out of trouble, and in a year this goes away. Understood?" "Yes, Your Honor," Mara whispered. "Good. Case dismissed." The gavel came down, and it was over. Outside the courthouse, Caleb pulled Mara into a hug that knocked the air out of her lungs. "You did it. You actually did it." "Elias did it," she said. "I just helped." "Same thing." He let her go, eyes bright. "Come on, let's go home." Home. The word hit Mara strange because the ranch wasn't her home. It was stolen land, the ghost of her father's dream. But standing there with Caleb and Elias in the weak Montana sunlight, it felt like maybe, possibly, it could be. They drove back in silence, Elias asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the trial. When they pulled up to the ranch, Caleb killed the engine but didn't get out. "The land," he said. "I meant what I said. It's yours if you want it." Mara looked out at the property. 4,000 acres her father had worked, had loved, had lost. She could take it back now. Could have justice, finally, after 30 years. But she thought about Elias, about the progress they'd made, about the work still ahead. She thought about her father's notebooks, about healing instead of hurting. "Not yet," she said. "Let's get your son walking first, really walking. Then we'll talk about the land." Caleb nodded. "Deal." And for the first time since she'd arrived at this ranch, Mara felt like maybe the future wasn't just something that happened to you. Maybe it was something you could choose. The ankle took 3 weeks to heal properly. 3 weeks of Elias sitting in his wheelchair, frustrated and restless, while the swelling went down and the purple faded to yellow-green. 3 weeks of Mara working on his upper body strength, his core, everything except the legs he was so desperate to use. "This is torture," he said one morning, watching her prepare resistance bands. "I can walk and you won't let me. You can barely walk and you've got a sprained ankle. That's not a combination that ends well." I walked in the courtroom. "And look how that turned out." She handed him the bands. 20 reps, both arms. He did the exercises, but his heart wasn't in it. Mara understood. He'd tasted freedom, actual, physical freedom, and now he was back in the chair, waiting. Patience had never been his strength. The ranch settled into a new rhythm. Mara was on probation, which meant monthly check-ins with a probation officer who seemed disappointed she wasn't causing trouble. The ankle monitor was gone, but the restrictions remained. No practicing medicine, no treating anyone for anything. She could cook, clean, and work with Elias on physical therapy, but that was it. 1 toe over the line and she'd be back in county jail. Caleb threw himself into ranch work with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. Up before dawn, out until dusk, fixing fences and moving cattle, and doing all the things that had piled up while he'd been focused on the trial. The ranch hands noticed, commented on it over dinner, how the boss was working himself ragged. Mara noticed too. Noticed how he avoided talking about the land, about the letters, about any future beyond getting through each day, like he was afraid that planning ahead would jinx it somehow. He's scared, Elias said one evening. They were on the porch, Elias in his chair, Mara in a rocking chair that creaked with every movement. Scared you're going to leave once I can walk. Why would I leave? Because you got what you came for. Proved everyone wrong. Made the impossible happen. He picked at the blanket over his legs. Plus there's the whole thing with the land. That's got to be weird for you, living here knowing it should have been yours. Mara rocked slowly, considering. Yeah, it's weird. But weird doesn't mean impossible. You ever think about what you'd do with it if you got it back? Sometimes. She watched the sun setting over the scrubland, painting everything orange and gold. My father wanted to build something here. Not just a ranch. A place where people could come when they had nowhere else to go. Healing center, maybe. Somewhere the doctors gave up on people, we'd take them in. That's a good dream. It's a dead man's dream. Doesn't mean much now. Could. Elias shifted in his chair, trying to get comfortable. Could mean something if you made it real. Before Mara could answer, Caleb's truck pulled up. He climbed out looking exhausted, dirt on his jeans, a fresh cut on his forearm. You're bleeding, Mara said. He glanced at his arm like he'd forgotten it was there. Barbed wire. It's nothing. It needs cleaning. I'll get to it. Caleb, I said I'll get to it. His voice was sharp, tired. Then he seemed to catch himself, softened. Sorry, long day. He went inside before either of them could respond. Mara and Elias exchanged a look. Told you, Elias said. Scared. That night, after Elias was asleep, Mara found Caleb in his office. The bottle of whiskey was out, but still full. He was staring at papers spread across his desk, land deeds, contracts, documents Mara recognized from her father's time. You okay? She asked from the doorway. Define okay. He didn't look up. I've been going through everything, every transaction my father made, every deal, every handshake agreement, trying to figure out what else he lied about. And there's a lot. Money borrowed and never paid back, promises made and broken, whole families pushed off their land because he found some legal loophole. Caleb finally looked at her. My inheritance is built on 30 years of my father screwing people over, including yours. Mara stepped into the office, closed the door behind her. You're not your father. No, but I've been living off what he stole. All this time thinking I earned this place through hard work, and it turns out I inherited it through fraud. He poured himself a drink, downed it. Makes me wonder what else I don't know, what other lies I've been living. So what are you going to do about it? I don't know. He poured another drink, didn't drink it, just stared at the amber liquid like it might have answers. I could give the land back to everyone my father wronged, bankrupt myself, start over. Or I could do what you suggested, settle it between us. Give you what's yours, keep the rest, try to be better than he was. Or, Mara said carefully, you could accept that the past is complicated, and the future doesn't have to be. That's supposed to be comforting? No, it's supposed to be true. She sat down across from him. Your father was a bastard. Mine trusted the wrong person. Neither of those things change what's happening now. Elias is healing. The ranch is running. We're both still here. That's what matters. Is it? Caleb met her eyes. Because every time I look at you, I think about what my father took from you. Every time I see you working with Elias, putting everything on the line for him, I think about how you shouldn't even be here. This should have been your land, your house, your life. And I stole it from you. You didn't steal anything. You were a kid when this happened. Doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it complicated. Mara leaned forward. Look, I spent 8 years angry. 8 years drifting from place to place, hating your family, hating this ranch, hating every reminder of what I lost. And you know what that anger got me? Nothing, just more years wasted. So you're saying I should just forget about it, pretend it didn't happen? I'm saying maybe we could build something new instead of tearing down something old. She picked up the letters from his desk, the proof of her father's agreement. These prove my father was wronged. They don't prove that revenge fixes anything. Maybe there's another way. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What kind of other way?" "I don't know yet, but we've got time to figure it out." The next morning, Dr. Pembroke showed up unannounced. Mara was in the kitchen making breakfast when she heard his car on the gravel drive. She looked out the window, saw him climbing out with that same self-righteous expression he'd worn since day one. Caleb met him at the door. "You're not welcome here. Come. I'm not here for a social call." Pembroke held up an envelope. "I've been appointed by the county medical board to conduct follow-up evaluations on Elias. Monthly assessments to ensure no permanent damage was done by Ms. Voss's treatments." "You've got to be kidding. I assure you I'm not. The board takes these matters seriously. I'll need to examine Elias today and every month for the next year." "Over my dead body." "Mr. Hadley, this isn't optional. If you refuse, I'll have to report non-compliance, which could result in Ms. Voss's probation being revoked." Pembroke's smile was thin. "I don't think either of you want that." Caleb looked like he wanted to throw the man off his porch, but finally he stepped aside. "Fine, but I'm staying in the room the whole time." "As is your right." They found Elias in the living room, working through the leg exercises Mara had given him. The ankle was mostly healed now, strong enough to bear weight again. He'd been pushing it, testing the limits, and Mara had been letting him. Carefully, but letting him. Pembroke set down his medical bag. "Hello, Elias. How are you feeling?" "Fine. Any pain, discomfort, numbness, or tingling?" "Just regular soreness from exercise." "I see." Pembroke pulled out his reflex hammer. "Let's do a full neurological assessment." He went through the tests: reflexes, sensation, motor control. Elias tolerated it with barely concealed annoyance, answering questions in monosyllables. When Pembroke asked him to demonstrate his range of motion, Elias didn't just flex his feet. He stood up. No warning, no preparation, just gripped the arms of his chair and pushed himself upright. His legs shook slightly, but held. He stood there for a full 30 seconds, staring at Pembroke with something like defiance. "Satisfied?" Elias asked. Pembroke's face was unreadable. "Sit down, please." "I can stand longer if you want. Or I could walk. Little unsteady still, but I'm getting better every day." "Sit down." Elias lowered himself back into the chair slowly, maintaining control the whole way. Pembroke made notes on his clipboard, jaw tight. "The improvement is notable," he said finally. "However, I'll need to see X-rays, MRI scans, proper diagnostic imaging to determine the actual state of your spine." "The actual state is that I can stand," Elias said. "Seems pretty diagnostic to me." "Medical diagnosis isn't based on anecdotal observation." "Then what's it based on?" "Because you diagnosed me as permanently paralyzed, and that was wrong. So maybe your diagnostic methods aren't as reliable as you think." Caleb made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. Pembroke's face went red. "I'll be back next month," he said stiffly. "In the meantime, I'm recommending a full medical workup at the hospital in Billings. Comprehensive testing to rule out any underlying issues that might have been missed." "Or to find something you can use against Mara," Elias shot back. "This isn't about Ms. Voss. This is about your health." "Right. Because you care so much about my health. That's why you wanted to lock me in some facility instead of letting me heal." Pembroke packed up his bag. "Mr. Hadley, I'll send you the paperwork for the testing. I strongly advise you to comply." After he left, Caleb let out a long breath. That man really knows how to ruin a morning. "He's scared," Mara said from the doorway. "Scared that if you're really healing, it proves he was wrong. And doctors hate being wrong." "So what do we do about the testing, the MRI and everything?" "We do it." Elias spoke up. "Let them run their tests. Let them see exactly what's happening in my spine, because I'm not hiding anymore. I'm getting better, and they can either accept that or choke on it." Caleb looked at Mara. "What do you think?" "I think Elias is right. Transparency works in our favor now. The more evidence we have, the harder it is for Pembroke to claim this is all in his head." So they scheduled the tests. 2 weeks later, Caleb drove Elias to Billings for a full day of medical evaluation. MRI, CT scan, nerve conduction studies, the works. Mara stayed behind. Her probation didn't allow her to leave the county, and spent the day cleaning the house from top to bottom, trying not to think about what the tests might show. Because there was always the possibility that she'd been wrong, that the improvement was temporary or incomplete, or that there was damage she'd missed that would show up on the scans. The possibility that Pembroke would be vindicated after all. They got back late that night. Elias was exhausted, overwhelmed by the testing. Caleb looked grim. "How'd it go?" Mara asked. "Long, lot of machines, lot of questions." Caleb helped Elias into his wheelchair. "Results come back in a few days."
"Did they say anything? Give you any indication?" The radiologist seemed surprised, kept asking Elias to move his legs, checking the scans again, but he wouldn't tell us anything definitive. "Surprised is good, right?" Elias said. He was barely keeping his eyes open. "Means something's different than they expected." "Maybe. Or maybe he was surprised by something bad." Caleb rubbed his face. "We won't know until the reports come in." Those next few days crawled. Mara kept working with Elias, but there was a tension in every session now, both of them wondering if this progress was real or borrowed time. Elias pushed harder than ever, like he was trying to bank as much healing as possible before someone told him it was impossible. On the third day, the reports arrived. Caleb opened them at the kitchen table, Mara and Elias watching. He read in silence, page after page, expression giving nothing away. Finally, he set them down. "Well?" Elias demanded. "What do they say?" "They say..." Caleb looked up, and there were tears in his eyes. "They say the inflammation around your L4 to L5 vertebrae is almost completely gone. The nerve pathways they thought were severed are showing activity. Muscle mass in your legs is rebuilding, and the radiologist's conclusion is that you're experiencing genuine neurological recovery." The kitchen went silent. "He was wrong?" Elias whispered. "Pembroke was wrong?" "Not just wrong, completely wrong." Caleb picked up the report, read directly from it. "Patient shows dramatic improvement inconsistent with initial diagnosis. Previous assessment of permanent paralysis appears to have been premature. Recommend continued physical therapy and monitoring, but prognosis is now favorable for partial to full recovery." Elias started crying, not sad crying, relieved, overwhelmed, joyful crying. Mara felt her own eyes burning, throat tight. "Partial to full recovery," Elias said through the tears. "That means I could walk. Really walk. Not just a few steps, but actually walk." "Yeah." Caleb's voice was rough. "That's what it means." They sat there in the kitchen, the three of them, letting the weight of it sink in. 2 years of being told it was impossible, and now medical proof that it wasn't. That Mara's father's techniques, passed down through generations, had done what modern medicine couldn't. "I'm sending a copy to Pembroke," Caleb said, "and to the medical board, and to Judge Kowalski. Everyone who said this was impossible gets to see exactly how wrong they were." "Think it'll change anything?" Mara asked. "Probably not, but it'll feel good." He looked at her. "You did this. You need to know that. You saved my son. We're not done yet. Partial recovery isn't full recovery. Close enough for me." Elias wiped his eyes. "I can walk. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not without practice, but I can walk. That's more than I ever thought I'd have." That night, Mara dreamed of her father for the first time in years. He was in their old kitchen, the one before the ranch was sold, teaching her how to make the herbal compresses. His hands were steady, voice patient, showing her exactly where to press, how much pressure to use. "Remember," he said in the dream, "the body wants to heal. Sometimes it just forgets how. Your job is to remind it." She woke up with tears on her face, but they didn't feel sad. They felt like closure. The week after the test results, Caleb called a meeting. Not just Mara and Elias, but his lawyer too, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia, who'd handled the ranch's legal affairs for years. They gathered in the dining room, papers spread across the table. "I've made a decision," Caleb said. "About the land." Mara's stomach tightened. "Caleb, we said we'd wait. I know what we said, but I can't wait anymore. It's eating at me." He picked up the deed to the ranch, the legal document that said 4,000 acres belonged to him. "This should be yours. My father stole it, and I've been living off that theft for 30 years.
It's time to make it right. Patricia cleared her throat. Mr. Hadley, I need to advise you that transferring this much property could have significant tax implications. I don't care about the taxes. You should. We're talking about potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. Patricia, I appreciate the concern, but this isn't a negotiation. This is me fixing something my father broke. He looked at Mara. I'm signing the ranch over to you. All of it. The land, the house, everything. It's what should have happened 30 years ago. Mara stared at him. You're serious? Completely. Caleb, I can't just take your ranch. It's not my ranch. It never was. He pushed the deed across the table toward her. It's yours. Has been since your father died. I'm just correcting a paperwork error that's 3 decades overdue. But what about you? What about Elias? Where will you go? I'll figure it out. Buy a smaller place. Start over. He said it like it was simple, like uprooting his entire life was no big deal. That's insane. It's justice. It's guilt masquerading as justice. Mara pushed the deed back toward him. I don't want the ranch. Everyone froze. Caleb looked like she'd slapped him. What? I don't want it. Not like this. Not with you leaving. Not with everything getting torn apart. She took a breath, tried to organize thoughts that had been swirling for weeks. My father wanted this land, yeah. But you know what he wanted more? To help people. To build something that mattered. And taking this ranch from you, kicking you out to satisfy some moral obligation, that doesn't help anyone. So what are you saying? I'm saying maybe there's a third option. She looked at Patricia. Can you do a partial transfer, split the property? The lawyer considered. Theoretically, yes. We could divide the acreage, create 2 separate parcels with their own deeds. How would that work? Caleb asked. Mara pulled out a ranch map from the pile of papers, studied it. You keep the main house and the operational ranch land. The good grazing areas, the parts you're actively using. 2,000 acres, maybe. And you take the other 2,000? Caleb said slowly. The eastern section. The part near the creek where the ground's not great for cattle, but could work for other things. She traced the boundary with her finger. I could build there. Start small. Maybe turn it into what my father wanted. A place for people who need healing. Nothing fancy, just a place. Elias was grinning. Like a healing center. That's perfect. It's a dream. Might not work. Most good things start as dreams, Caleb said. He studied the map, working through the logistics. The eastern section's got water rights, some timber. You'd have enough to build, to sustain something, and we'd be neighbors. Yeah, we would be. I like this better than my plan. Your plan was martyrdom. Mine's just practical. Mara looked at Patricia. Can you draw up the papers? I can, but it'll take some time to survey the new boundaries, establish the division legally. We're looking at a few months, minimum. That's fine. We're not in a hurry. Patricia made notes. I'll need both of you to agree on the exact division. Property lines, water access, easements, and there's still the tax issue. We'll figure it out, Caleb said. He looked at Mara. You're sure about this? You could take the whole thing. You're entitled to it. Entitled doesn't mean it's right. This way, we both get something. You keep your home, I get my father's dream. Seems fair. More than fair. He offered his hand across the table. Partners? Mara shook it. Partners. The next months were a blur of paperwork and planning. Surveyor came out, walked the land, established new boundaries. The lawyers drew up contracts. Mara and Caleb spent hours going over details. Where to run fence lines, how to split the water rights, what happened if one of them wanted to sell later. And through it all, Elias kept healing. By June, he could walk the length of the hallway without the walker. By July, he was climbing stairs. Slow, unsteady, but climbing. By August, he walked out to the barn on his own, fed the horses, came back without help. The transformation was staggering. The pale, broken boy from March was gone. In his place was a kid who smiled, who moved, who had a future that wasn't measured in inches of progress, but in actual possibilities. Dr. Pembroke came for his monthly evaluations, each time looking more deflated than the last. He couldn't deny the recovery anymore. The evidence was too overwhelming. By September, he stopped trying to find fault and just went through the motions, professional but defeated. Final evaluation, he said during his last visit. Unless you're experiencing any problems, I don't see a need for further monitoring. I'm good, Elias said. He was standing for the entire evaluation, had been for the last 3 months. Better than good. Pembroke packed his bag. For what it's worth, this is remarkable. I've never seen recovery like this from an injury like yours. Mara did it, not you. Yes, I'm aware. He looked at Mara. I owe you an apology. I was wrong. About the treatment, about the potential for recovery, about everything. Mara didn't know what to say to that. Part of her wanted to gloat, to rub his face in how wrong he'd been. But mostly, she just felt tired. Apology accepted, she said. After he left, Caleb poured coffee for everyone. Think he means it? The apology? Does it matter? Mara sat down at the table. He was wrong. We were right. Him feeling bad about it doesn't change anything. Still nice to hear, though. Yeah, it is. The property division was finalized in October. Patricia brought the new deeds to the ranch, official and legal. Caleb signed his. Mara signed hers. Just like that, she owned 2,000 acres of Montana land. The eastern section, the part with the creek and the timber and the endless sky. Her father's land. Finally. She walked the property line that afternoon, Elias coming with her. He moved carefully, still building endurance, but he moved. On his own feet, under his own power. You're really going to build here? He asked, looking at the empty land. Eventually, need to save up money first. Figure out what exactly I want to build. She picked up a handful of soil, let it run through her fingers. But yeah, this is it. This is where it starts. What it? Whatever comes next. They stood there in the October wind, looking at land that had been stolen and reclaimed, at a future neither of them could have imagined 6 months ago. Thank you, Elias said quietly, for everything, for not giving up on me, for fighting when everyone else said to stop, for teaching me that impossible just means nobody's tried hard enough yet. You did the work. I just showed you the way. Still, thank you. He turned to face her. And I'm going to help. Whatever you build here, I'm going to help. I owe you that much. You don't owe me anything. I know. I want to anyway. He grinned. Besides, someone's got to make sure you don't work yourself to death. You're terrible at taking breaks. Mara laughed. Fair point. They walked back to the ranch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Caleb was waiting on the porch, watching them approach. How's it feel? He called out. Being a landowner? Strange, Mara called back. Good, but strange. Get used to it. You're stuck with us now. She climbed the porch steps, stood next to him, looked out at the property, his half and hers, divided but connected. Could be worse places to be stuck, she said. Could be better ones too, but we work with what we've got. He handed her a beer, already opened. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, she echoed. They clinked bottles and drank as the stars came out, one by one, over land that had finally found its way home. Winter came early that year, the first snow falling in mid-November and not letting up for 3 days straight. Mara stood at the kitchen window watching it accumulate, thinking about foundation plans and building permits and all the things she'd need to do before spring if she wanted to break ground on her father's dream. The money was the hard part. 2,000 acres didn't mean much if you couldn't afford to build on them. She'd saved some from her wages at the ranch, but not enough. Not nearly enough for the kind of facility she was imagining, something small but solid, a few rooms for patients, a treatment area, maybe a greenhouse for growing the herbs her father had used. You're thinking too loud, Caleb said from the doorway. I can hear it from the other room. Just planning. Planning's fine. Obsessing's different. He came to stand beside her, 2 coffee cups in hand, passed her one. What's the holdup? Money, or lack thereof. She took the coffee gratefully. I ran the numbers last night. Even building small, I'm looking at close to $100,000. And that's if I do a lot of the work myself. So get a loan. Banks don't loan money to drifters with criminal records. You're not a drifter anymore. You own land. That's collateral. Maybe. She sipped the coffee, bitter and strong.
Or maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Maybe I should just build a cabin, live simple, forget about the healing center. That what you want? No, but wanting something and being able to afford it are two different things. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I've got some money saved. From selling off the cattle I don't need anymore. Plus some investments my father left. It's not a fortune, but it's something. Call it $40,000. Mara looked at him. You're not giving me $40,000. Not giving, investing. He met her eyes. You build this healing center, you're going to need help running it. I know ranching, I know business, I know how to keep books. So I invest in your project, become a partner. Silent partner if you want, but a partner. Caleb, before you say no, think about it. You've got the knowledge, the skills, the vision. I've got the money and the business sense. Together we could actually make this work. Why would you do that? You don't owe me anything. This isn't about owing. This is about building something good, something that helps people. He turned to face her fully. My father spent 30 years taking from people. I'd like to spend the next 30 giving something back, and this seems like a good place to start. Mara wanted to argue, wanted to say she could do it alone, didn't need his charity. But the truth was, she did need help. Building a healing center wasn't a one-person job, and pride wasn't worth sacrificing her father's dream over. Okay, she said. Partners. But we do this right. Legal contracts, clear responsibilities, everything documented. Wouldn't have it any other way. They shook on it there in the kitchen, snow falling outside, a new chapter beginning. The planning took months. Mara drew up plans based on her father's notebooks, sketching out a main building with treatment rooms, a smaller residence for herself, and eventually space to expand if the center took off. Caleb handled the legal side, permits, zoning, insurance, all the bureaucratic nightmare of building something from scratch. They argued. A lot. About design, about budget, about whether they needed a full kitchen or just a kitchenette, about where to put the well, about everything. But they worked through it, compromise by compromise, until they had something they both believed in. Elias appointed himself project manager, which mostly meant he hung around asking questions and offering unsolicited advice. But he was helpful too, researching building codes, calling contractors for quotes, making spreadsheets that tracked every expense down to the last nail. You're worse than your father, Mara told him one afternoon. They were at the building site, stakes marking where the foundation would go. Learned from the best. He was walking now, without even thinking about it, his gait almost normal except when he was tired. Speaking of which, Dad wants to know if you've decided on the roofing material. Metal lasts longer in this climate. That's what I told him, but he's worried about cost. Everything's about cost with him, because he's the one writing the checks. Elias squatted down, examining the stakes. You know he sold his truck, right? Got a cheaper one. Put the difference into the building fund. Mara hadn't known. He didn't tell me that. He wouldn't, but I thought you should know. Elias stood up, brushed dirt off his hands. He believes in this. Believes in you. Just thought you should know that too. That night at dinner, Mara watched Caleb across the table. He looked tired. They all did, between the ranch work and the building project. But there was something else too. Something lighter than she'd seen in him before. Thank you, she said abruptly. He looked up from his plate. For what? The truck. The investment. All of it. Elias told you. Yeah. Kid can't keep a secret to save his life. But he was smiling. It's fine. Didn't need a fancy truck anyway. Old one works just as good. Still, you didn't have to. I know, but I wanted to. He set down his fork. You asked me once why I was doing this, helping with the center. And I gave you some line about giving back, about fixing my father's mistakes. But the truth is simpler than that. Yeah? Yeah. The truth is you gave me my son back. You took a broken kid who'd given up and taught him how to fight. Taught him that impossible just means hard, not undoable. And watching him walk again, watching him become himself again, that's worth more than money. Worth more than anything. His voice roughened. So if I can help you build something, help you create a place where other people get what Elias got, then that's not charity. That's the least I can do. Mara's throat went tight.
You're going to make me cry into my dinner. Please don't. Took me an hour to make that roast. They laughed, and the moment passed, but the weight of it stayed. This thing they were building together, it mattered, to both of them. Spring came with mud and chaos. The foundation went in first, concrete poured and set while the ground was still half frozen. Then framing, the skeleton of the building rising from the earth like a promise taking shape. Mara worked alongside the contractors when she could, learning as she went. How to frame a wall, how to run electrical, how to think 3 steps ahead so you didn't have to tear things out later. Caleb handled the business side, but he showed up at the site most days too, checking progress, problem solving when things went wrong. And things went wrong constantly. Delayed shipments, measurements that didn't match the plans, weather that knocked them off schedule for days at a time. But slowly, stubbornly, the building took shape. By June, the roof was on. By July, the exterior walls were up. By August, they were working on interior finishes, drywall and paint, and the 1,000 small details that turned a shell into a space people could use. Mara painted the treatment rooms herself, choosing colors her father had written about in his notebooks. Soft greens for calm, warm yellows for energy, blues for healing. It felt right, connecting this new thing to his old knowledge. "Looks good," Elias said, standing in the doorway of what would be the main treatment room. "He'd be proud, you know. Your dad." "Maybe." Mara dipped her brush, started on another wall. "Or maybe he'd tell me I mixed the green wrong and the proportions are all off." He was like that? Perfectionist. Everything had to be exactly right, or it didn't count. She smiled at the memory. "Drove me crazy when I was learning, but looking back, I get it. When you're working with people's bodies, with their health, close enough isn't good enough. That why you're so careful with the treatments. Yeah. Can't afford to mess up when someone's trusting you with their recovery." Elias came into the room, picked up a spare brush. "Teach me." "Teach you what?" "The healing stuff. The techniques." He started painting, careful strokes that stayed inside the lines. "I know the basics from watching you work on me, but I want to know more. Want to be able to help when people come here." Mara stopped painting. "Elias, that's years of training. So we start now. I'm 13, I've got time." He looked at her seriously. "You said this place is for people the doctors give up on, people like me, and I want to help them. Want to show them that recovery is possible. Who better than someone who's lived it?" She couldn't argue with that logic. "Okay, but you do it right. Study the notebooks, learn the theory before you try the practice, and you only work under supervision until you've got at least a year of training." "Deal." He grinned. "When do we start?" "Tonight, after dinner. Bring your notebook and your patience. You're going to need both." They fell into a new routine. Days spent building, evenings spent teaching. Mara would work with Elias the way her father had worked with her, starting with the fundamentals. Anatomy, pressure points, how to read a body's signals. Elias absorbed it like he was starving for it, filling notebooks with diagrams and notes, asking questions that got to the heart of things. "How do you know when to stop?" he asked one night. They were in the ranch kitchen, Mara's father's notebook spread across the table. When you're working on someone and they're in pain but you know pushing through might help, how do you know when it's too much? You listen to their body, to their breathing, to the tension in their muscles, and you trust your instincts. She flipped through a notebook, found a page her father had marked. But here's the thing. There's a difference between pain that means progress and pain that means damage. Progress pain is sharp but clean. Damage pain is deep and wrong. You learn to feel the difference. That's not very scientific. No, but it works. She pushed the notebook toward him. "Read that section. My father's notes on inflammation versus injury. He explains it better than I can." Elias read, forehead creased in concentration. Mara watched him and saw echoes of the boy he'd been, desperate, hopeful, willing to try anything. But now there was strength there too, earned through months of pain and work and refusing to quit. "You're good at this," she said. "The learning, the questions. You've got the mind for it. Think I could do it? Really? Help people the way you helped me?" "Yeah, I do." She meant it. You've got something most healers never get: personal experience. You know what it feels like to be told it's impossible. That matters. He smiled, real and bright. Good, because I'm planning on it. By September, the healing center was finished. Not fancy, not elaborate, but solid and functional. 3 treatment rooms, a small office, a kitchen, and Mara's residence in the back. 2 rooms and a bathroom, everything she needed. The greenhouse was still just a foundation, but that could wait. The important parts were done. They held a small opening ceremony. Nothing official, just Mara and Caleb and Elias standing in front of the building as the sun set. There was no ribbon to cut, no crowd to applaud. Just the 3 of them and the beginning of something. What do we call it? Elias asked. The center. It needs a name.
Mara looked at the building, at the land stretching out behind it, at the sky going purple with dusk. Voss Healing Center, after my father, seemed right. Voss Healing Center, Caleb repeated. I like it. Simple. Honest. Like the work. They went inside, turned on the lights. The treatment rooms glowed warm and welcoming. Mara ran her hand along the wall, felt the texture of the paint she'd applied herself. Now what? She asked. We've got the building. How do we get people to come? Word of mouth, Caleb said. Start small. Help a few people. Do it well. Let them tell others. That's how these things grow. And we've already got our first patient, Elias added. Mrs. Patterson from town. Remember her? She's got arthritis in her hands, can barely hold a pen anymore. Dad told her about this place, and she wants to try. When? Next week, if you're ready. Mara looked around the center. Her center, the dream that had lived in her father's notebooks and her own head for so long, finally real. Yeah, I'm ready. Mrs. Patterson came on a Tuesday morning, a woman in her 70s with gnarled hands and a skeptical expression. She looked around the treatment room like she was expecting quackery. My grandson tried to talk me out of coming, she said as Mara prepared the herbal compress. Said this was probably a scam. It's not a scam, but I can't promise miracles either. Mara soaked the cloth in hot water mixed with arnica and ginger. What I can promise is that I'll do my best, and if it doesn't help, I won't charge you. Fair enough? Mrs. Patterson extended her hands. Do your worst. Mara worked for an hour, using techniques her father had taught her for joint inflammation. Heat therapy, gentle massage, pressure points that targeted the swelling. Mrs. Patterson winced at first, then gradually relaxed as the warmth sank in.
How's that feel? Mara asked. Mrs. Patterson flexed her fingers, slow and careful. Different, looser, maybe. Doesn't hurt as much. The relief might be temporary. Arthritis is chronic, but regular treatments could help manage the pain, improve your range of motion. How regular? Once a week to start? We'll see how you respond. Mrs. Patterson studied her fingers, opening and closing them. I can make a fist. Haven't been able to do that in 6 months. She looked up at Mara. Same time next week? Same time next week. Word spread slowly at first, then faster. Mrs. Patterson told her friends. Her friends told their families. By October, Mara was seeing 4 patients a week. By November, 8. Nothing dramatic, but steady. People with chronic pain, old injuries, conditions the doctors had said to just live with. She didn't cure everyone. Some people didn't respond to the treatments or responded minimally. But enough improved, enough found relief, regained function, got pieces of their lives back, that the center started to build a reputation. Elias helped when he could, observing treatments, taking notes, learning. Mara was careful to follow the legal restrictions from her probation. She wasn't practicing medicine, just providing alternative therapy. But the line was thin, and she knew it. One complaint, one accusation, and she could be back in front of Judge Kowalski. But the complaints didn't come. Instead, referrals did. A physical therapist in town started sending patients Mara's way. A chiropractor mentioned the center to people who weren't responding to conventional treatment. Even a few doctors, reluctantly, quietly, suggested people might want to try it. And then, in December, a letter arrived. Mara opened it at the kitchen table, Caleb and Elias watching. It was from the Montana Board of Alternative Medicine, official letterhead and everything.
What do they want? Caleb asked. Mara scanned the letter once, then again to make sure she was reading it right. They want to license me. create a new category for traditional healing practices. Said they've been getting inquiries about the center, looked into what I'm doing, and they want to make it official. Is that good? Elias asked. I think so. It would mean I could practice legally. No more probation restrictions, no more worry about practicing medicine without a license. She set down the letter, hands shaking slightly. It would mean legitimacy. So do it, Caleb said. Take the license. It's not that simple. There's an application process, a review board, probably testing, so you'll pass. You helped Elias when every doctor said it was impossible. You've helped dozens of people since then. Whatever hoops they want you to jump through, you'll manage. Mara looked at the letter again. Legitimacy. Recognition.
A chance to do this work without always looking over her shoulder, waiting for someone to shut her down. Okay, she said. I'll apply. The application process took 3 months. Written exams on anatomy and ethics, practical demonstrations of her techniques, interviews with board members who asked probing questions about safety protocols and limitations. It was exhausting and stressful, and everything Mara hated about bureaucracy. But in March, almost exactly a year after she'd first treated Elias, the license arrived. Official, legal, legitimate. Mara Voss, licensed traditional healer, authorized to practice in the state of Montana. She framed it and hung it in the center's waiting room, right below the sign that read, Voss Healing Center. Looks official, Elias said, admiring it. Feels weird, Mara admitted. I've spent so long operating in the margins. Being legitimate is going to take some getting used to. You'll manage. He turned to her, serious now. Can I ask you something? Always. Are you happy? Like, really happy? Because you've built all this, accomplished all this, but I can't tell if it's what you actually wanted or just what you thought you should want. Mara thought about it, about the center, the patients, the work that filled her days, about the land that was finally hers, the partnership with Caleb that had become something like friendship, maybe even family, about Elias himself, walking and healthy and planning to study medicine so he could help others the way she'd helped him. Yeah, she said finally. I'm happy. Not perfect happy, because nothing's perfect, but real happy. The kind that comes from doing work that matters. Good, because you deserve it. He headed for the door, then stopped. Oh, and Dad wants to know if you're coming to dinner tonight. He's making that chicken thing you like. Tell him yes, and tell him to make extra. I'm starving. Spring came again, the second since Mara had arrived at the ranch. The land greened up, snow melting into the creek that ran through her property. She walked the boundaries sometimes, just to feel the ground under her feet, to remind herself this was real. One afternoon in April, she found Caleb sitting on a fence post near the property line between his land and hers. You lost? She called out. Just thinking. He patted the post next to him. Come think with me. She climbed up, settled beside him. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching clouds drift across the sky. Year ago tomorrow, Caleb said finally. That you first came to the ranch. Has it only been a year? Feels longer. Yeah. He picked at a splinter on the fence post. I've been thinking about that. About everything that's changed. Elias walking, the center, the land division, all of it. Regretting any of it? Not even a little. He looked at her. But I've been thinking about what comes next. For all of us. What do you mean? Elias wants to go to college, pre-med, if he can get in. He's got the grades, the story, probably a hell of an essay about overcoming paralysis. Caleb smiled, but it was edged with sadness. Kid's got a future that doesn't include this ranch, and I'm proud of him for that. But it makes me wonder what happens to this place when he's gone. You keep running it, same as always. Maybe, or maybe I scale back, sell off more of the herd, hire it out, focus on helping you with the center. He turned to face her fully. I'm good at business, Mara. Good at managing money and people and logistics. The center's growing faster than you can handle alone. You need help. We've been over this. You're already a silent partner. I'm saying maybe I don't want to be silent anymore. Maybe I want to be an active partner, full time. Help you run the place. Manage the business side so you can focus on the healing. Mara stared at him. You'd give up ranching? I'd give up full-time ranching. Keep enough cattle to stay sane, lease out the rest of the land. It makes sense financially, and honestly, I'm tired. Been working this place since I was 17, 30 years of the same thing. Maybe it's time for something different. And you think that something different is helping me? I think that something different is building something that matters. Same thing Elias said to you, same thing you said to me. He looked out at the land. My father took from people. I want to give back. And the center's the best way I know to do that. Mara thought about it. About running the center with Caleb as a full partner. About what they could build together with his business sense and her healing knowledge. About not having to do it all alone. Okay, she said, but we do it right. Equal partnership, equal say in decisions, everything documented. Wouldn't have it any other way. They shook on it, there on the fence post between their properties, sealing a partnership that had started with theft and desperation and somehow become something better. The center continued to grow. With Caleb handling the business side, Mara could see more patients, develop new treatment protocols, even start training others in her father's techniques. Elias worked there part-time while finishing high school, learning and helping and preparing for his own future in medicine. By summer, they'd expanded into the greenhouse, growing the herbs Mara needed for treatments. By fall, they were talking about adding another treatment room, maybe hiring a second healer if they could find someone qualified. We're going to need a bigger building, Caleb said one evening, reviewing the budget. At this rate, we'll be turning people away by next year. Good problem to have, Mara said. She was going through patient files, making notes on treatment plans. Still a problem. We should start planning now if we want to expand. Let me think about it. She closed the file, rubbed her tired eyes. Right now I just want to get through this week. Got 3 new patients starting Monday, plus all the regulars. You're working too hard. Says the man who was up at 5 fixing fences. That's different. I like fixing fences. And I like helping people. So we're both workaholics. At least we're honest about it. Caleb laughed. Fair point. Elias graduated high school that spring with honors and a full scholarship to the university in Missoula. Mara and Caleb sat in the bleachers at the ceremony, watching him walk across the stage without even a trace of a limp. Hard to believe that's the same kid, Caleb said, voice rough with emotion. It's not, Mara said. Same body, different kid. He earned this. You gave him the chance to earn it. We gave him the chance, you, me, him. Team effort. After the ceremony, they took Elias out to dinner at the nicest restaurant in town. He couldn't stop grinning, the diploma in his hands like a trophy. 4 years, he said. Then medical school if I can get in. Then I'm coming back here, working at the center. That's the plan. That's a long time, Caleb said. Plans change. You might find you like the city. Want to stay there. Not a chance. This is home. The center's home. Elias looked at Mara. You'll still be here, right? In 4 years, 8 years? However long it takes. Where else would I go? She raised her glass. To the future. However long it takes. They clinked glasses, 3 people who'd found each other through desperation and built something lasting through sheer stubborn will. 2 years later, the center had doubled in size. They'd added 3 more treatment rooms, hired 2 other practitioners, and built the second greenhouse. Patients came from all over Montana now, some from neighboring states. People with chronic pain, sports injuries, conditions conventional medicine had given up on. The center didn't cure everyone, but it helped enough that the reputation kept growing. Caleb ran the business side with efficient precision, handling everything from billing to supply orders to scheduling. Mara focused on the healing work and training new practitioners. Together, they'd created something sustainable, something that could outlast them both. One evening in late autumn, Mara sat on the porch of her small residence, watching the sun set over land that was finally, completely hers. The deed was framed in her bedroom, next to a photo of her father. The ranch house where Caleb still lived was visible in the distance, lights just starting to come on as dusk settled. She heard footsteps, looked up to see Caleb approaching with 2 beers. Thought you might want company, he said. Always. She took a beer, moved over so he could sit. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out. This had become their routine over the years. End of the day, porch time, just existing together without needing to fill the silence. Elias called, Caleb said eventually. Got accepted to medical school. Johns Hopkins. That's amazing. Yeah, terrifying, but amazing. He took a long drink. He'll be gone for years. 4 years of medical school, then residency, could be 8 years before he's back. He'll be back, though, he promised. I know, but a lot can happen in 8 years. A lot can happen in 2 years. Look at us. Mara gestured at the center, at the land, at everything they'd built. 2 years ago I was in jail. You were barely speaking to your son, and this place was just a dream. Now look. Now look, Caleb echoed. He was quiet for a moment, then said, I'm glad you came here. Glad you didn't walk away when things got hard. Glad you fought. Me too. She meant it. For all the pain, all the struggle, all the impossible moments, she wouldn't change it. So what now? Caleb asked. We've built the center, helped hundreds of people, got Elias into medical school. What's the next impossible thing? Mara thought about it. About her father's notebooks, still only partially explored. About techniques she hadn't tried yet, conditions she hadn't treated. About the potential to train more healers, to spread this work beyond one small center in Montana. I don't know, she said honestly, but I'm sure we'll figure it out. Yeah, we will. They sat there as full dark fell, two people who'd found their way to something good through the most unlikely path imaginable. The center glowed behind them, windows lit and welcoming. Somewhere inside, the sign still hung. Voss Healing Center, named for a man who'd died believing his life's work would die with him. But it hadn't. It had lived on through his daughter, through the boy she'd saved, through every person who walked through those doors looking for hope, when everyone else had told them to give up. The land remembered. The body remembered. And Mara Voss, overlooked and underestimated her whole life, had proven that sometimes the impossible just needed the right person stubborn enough to try. She looked out at the Montana sky, vast and star-filled, and felt something she hadn't felt in 8 years of drifting. She felt home. Not just in a place, but in a purpose. In work that mattered, and people who cared, and a future that was hers to choose. Spring's coming, Caleb said, breaking into her thoughts. Yeah. Can feel it in the air. Another few months and we'll be planting again, building again, starting the next chapter. Good. Mara finished her beer, set the empty bottle down. I'm ready. And she was, for spring, for the future, for whatever came next. Because she'd learned something in the past 2 years, something her father had tried to teach her, but she'd only really understood through living it. The body remembered how to heal. The land remembered whose it was. And if you were patient enough, stubborn enough, brave enough to fight for what mattered, impossible became possible. One step at a time.